When Lena Hart walked into the Russo family home to meet her charming date Adrian, she never expected his older brother Marco to step through the door and steal the breath from her lungs. One look, one moment, and she knew with terrifying certainty she'd flirted with the wrong brother. But in a family where loyalty is currency and betrayal means blood, wanting the man she can't have might be the most dangerous mistake of her life. If you're ready for a story about forbidden desire, dangerous families, and choosing the complicated path to real love, stay with me until the very end. And if you're enjoying this, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The Sunday afternoon sun filtered through the tall windows of Lena Hart's Brooklyn yoga studio, casting geometric shadows across the polished hardwood floor. She stood in the center of the empty room, her body flowing through a series of sun salutations with the kind of precision that came from years of practice. Inhale. Exhale. The rhythm of her breath matched the rhythm of her thoughts. Controlled, measured, predictable. Predictable. That word had been following her lately, whispering in the quiet moments between classes, echoing in her small apartment above the studio. At 31, Lena had built exactly the life she'd planned: a successful business, a tight circle of friends, a calm existence free from drama or chaos. She'd spent her 20s recovering from the explosion of her parents' volatile marriage, and she'd promised herself that her own life would be different, stable, safe, boring. Her best friend Maya called it, though never unkindly. Her phone buzzed from the wooden bench against the wall, shattering her meditation. Lena held her pose for 3 more breaths before gracefully transitioning out of downward dog. The screen displayed a text from Adrian Russo, the man she'd been seeing for the past 3 weeks. Still good for 4 p.m.? Mom's making her famous braciole. Fair warning, she'll try to feed you enough for a week. Can't wait to see you. Lena smiled despite the flutter of nerves in her stomach. Adrian was warm, attentive, genuinely kind, everything she'd told herself she wanted. They'd met at a charity fundraiser for youth sports programs, where he'd been volunteering his time coaching basketball. He had an easy laugh and kind eyes, and he'd asked about her work with genuine interest, not just as a prelude to talking about himself. 3 weeks of coffee dates and long walks through Prospect Park. 3 weeks of good conversation and gentle goodnight kisses that never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Adrian Russo was patient, respectful, and completely unlike the brooding, intense men she'd wasted her 20s on. So why did the thought of meeting his family make her hands shake? Looking forward to it, she typed back, adding a smiley face before she could overthink it. Should I bring anything? Just yourself. See you soon, beautiful. Beautiful. Adrian called her that easily, casually, like it was a simple fact rather than a loaded compliment. Lena caught her reflection in the studio's mirror, dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, gray yoga pants and a faded tank top, her face bare of makeup. She'd need to transform herself in the next 2 hours into someone worthy of meeting an Italian family on their sacred Sunday dinner ritual. The shower in her apartment ran cold for the first 3 minutes, as it always did, but Lena had learned to find meditation in discomfort. She let the icy water shock her system awake, washing away the last traces of her morning classes. When the heat finally kicked in, she stood under the spray and tried to calm the inexplicable anxiety building in her chest. It's just dinner, she told herself. Just meeting his family. Adrian wouldn't introduce you to them if he wasn't serious about this. That thought should have comforted her. Instead, it made her stomach clench tighter. By 3:30, Lena had changed outfits 4 times and was seriously considering canceling. The dress hanging on her bedroom door, a simple navy blue wrap dress that Maya had insisted she buy, seemed simultaneously too formal and too casual. Her small apartment, usually a sanctuary of minimalist calm, felt suffocating with discarded clothing options scattered across every surface. "You're being ridiculous," she said aloud to her reflection. The woman staring back at her looked polished but nervous, dark eyes too wide, hands fidgeting with the delicate gold necklace at her throat. She'd left her hair down, dark waves falling past her shoulders, and kept her makeup natural. Professional but approachable. Interested but not desperate. God, when had dating become a strategic military operation? Her phone buzzed again. "Outside whenever you're ready. No rush." Lena grabbed her purse, a bottle of good red wine she'd agonized over at the corner store, and headed downstairs before she could talk herself out of it. Adrian's car, a sleek but understated black sedan, was idling at the curb. He stepped out when he saw her, and his face lit up with the kind of smile that had first caught her attention. "You look amazing," he said, pressing a kiss to her cheek. His cologne was subtle, woodsy. Everything about Adrian Russo was carefully calibrated to put people at ease. "You sure your family won't mind an unexpected guest?" Lena asked as he opened the passenger door for her. "Are you kidding? My mother's been asking about you since our second date. I think she's already planning the wedding." Adrian's tone was light, teasing, but something flickered in his eyes. Nervousness? No, that wasn't quite right. Warning, maybe. The drive from her studio in Brooklyn to the Russo family home in Bay Ridge took 20 minutes, during which Adrian filled the comfortable silence with stories about his childhood. He painted a picture of big family dinners, of cousins running wild through a backyard, of a mother whose love language was food, and a father who'd worked construction to build a better life for his sons. "How many brothers do you have?" Lena asked, realizing she'd never thought to ask before. "Just one, Marco." Something shifted in Adrian's voice when he said the name. "He's older by 3 years. You'll meet him today. He never misses Sunday dinner." "What's he like?" Adrian was quiet for a moment, his hands tightening almost imperceptibly on the steering wheel. "Different from me. We've always been very different." Before Lena could ask what that meant, they were pulling up to a beautiful 2-story home with a manicured lawn and flower boxes bursting with late summer blooms. Cars lined the street. Expensive cars, Lena noticed. Mercedes, BMW, a Tesla. Either the Russo family was doing very well, or this was a bigger gathering than Adrian had implied. "Big family," she observed, trying to keep her voice light. "Yeah." Adrian cut the engine but didn't immediately move to get out. "Lena, I should probably mention." The front door burst open and a tiny woman in an apron came barreling down the walkway, her face creased with joy. "Adrian, you're late, and this must be Lena." Whatever Adrian had been about to say was lost as his mother, because this could only be Mrs. Russo, pulled Lena into a fierce hug that smelled like garlic and basil and warmth. "Mrs. Russo, it's so wonderful to meet you," Lena managed, returning the embrace with genuine affection. There was something immediately comforting about this woman's unrestrained enthusiasm. "Mrs. Russo, please, you call me Sophia." Mrs. Russo was Adrian's grandmother, God rest her soul. Sophia pulled back, holding Lena at arm's length to examine her properly. "Oh, you're even more beautiful than Adrian said, and so thin. We need to feed you. Come inside. Everyone's waiting." Everyone turned out to be at least 15 people crowded into a living room that opened into a dining area, where a table was set for what looked like a feast. Lena was introduced to a dizzying array of aunts, uncles, cousins, and family friends, whose names blurred together in a warm cacophony of Italian-American affection. They welcomed her with hugs and kisses on both cheeks, with questions about her work and compliments on her dress, with the kind of instant acceptance that felt both overwhelming and touching. Adrian stayed close, his hand warm on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. He was relaxed here, smiling, more animated than she'd seen him. This was his element, surrounded by family, by people who loved him unconditionally. "Where's Marco?" Sophia asked suddenly, her eyes scanning the room. "He said he'd be here by 4. "You know Marco," one of the uncles said with a laugh. "Probably closing some big deal. That boy works too hard." "He works too much," Sophia corrected, but her voice carried pride beneath the criticism. "Just like his father used to." Lena felt Adrian tense beside her, just slightly. His hand pressed more firmly against her back. "Come," Sophia said, linking her arm through Lena's. "Let me show you the kitchen. You can help me with the final touches, and we can talk. I want to know everything about the woman who's finally got my Adrian smiling again." The kitchen was the heart of the home, warm and fragrant with the scent of slow-cooked tomato sauce and fresh bread. Sophia moved through the space with practiced efficiency, checking on multiple pots and pans while peppering Lena with questions that somehow never felt intrusive. What part of Brooklyn was her studio in? How long had she been teaching yoga? Did she have family nearby? Lena found herself relaxing, falling into the rhythm of Sophia's warmth. She chopped fresh basil for the salad while explaining how she'd opened her studio 5 years ago, how it had started as a dream and become her entire world. It's good to have passion, Sophia said, stirring the sauce with a wooden spoon that looked older than Lena. But passion alone, it's not enough. You need balance. You need someone to share the load with. Mama, Adrian groaned from the doorway. We've been dating 3 weeks. Can you not plan the entire future in the first 5 minutes? 3 weeks? 3 years? When you know, you know. Sophia waved the spoon dismissively, spattering sauce on her apron. Your father, I knew the moment I met him. One look and I thought, that's the man I'm going to marry. One look. The words echoed in Lena's mind with strange resonance as she smiled and nodded, as she let Sophia's stories wash over her. She glanced at Adrian, trying to imagine that moment of absolute certainty, of knowing beyond doubt that this person was meant to be hers. He was watching her with such open affection that she felt guilty for even questioning it. Adrian was good, kind, safe. That was what she wanted. That was what she needed after years of chaos. So why did it feel like she was trying to convince herself? The sound of the front door opening silenced the chatter in the living room. Lena looked up from the salad she was tossing, catching the sudden shift in energy that rippled through the house. It was subtle but unmistakable, like the air pressure dropping before a storm. Marco! Sophia's face lit up with pure maternal joy. She wiped her hands on her apron and hurried toward the front of the house. Finally! We were about to start without you. Adrian's jaw tightened. Lena, I should... But it was too late. He walked into the kitchen with the kind of presence that didn't announce itself. It simply was. Lena's hand stilled on the salad tongs, her breath caught in her throat. And for one suspended moment, the entire world narrowed to the man standing in the doorway. Marco Russo was nothing like his brother. Where Adrian was warm and approachable, Marco was winter itself, cold, controlled, devastatingly sharp. He wore a charcoal suit with the kind of carelessness that came from wearing expensive things every day. The jacket unbuttoned, the tie loosened at his throat. Dark hair, darker eyes, and a face that could have been carved from marble by an artist who understood that beauty didn't have to be soft to be devastating. But it wasn't his appearance that stole Lena's breath. It was the way he looked at her. Those dark eyes found her instantly, locked on her with an intensity that felt physical. No polite greeting, no warm smile, just pure, undiluted focus that made her feel simultaneously seen and exposed. The kitchen was suddenly too small, the air too thick. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs with a violence that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with recognition. This was the feeling Sophia had described. One look and knowing. Oh God. Marco? Sophia was oblivious to the electricity crackling through her kitchen. She reached up to cup her older son's face, forcing him to bend down so she could kiss both cheeks. You're late. What kind of business keeps you working on Sunday? The kind that pays for dinners like this? Marco's voice was low, rough-edged, nothing like Adrian's smooth warmth. His eyes hadn't left Lena's. Sorry, Mama. Well, you're here now. Come. Meet Adrian's girlfriend. Lena, this is my oldest son, Marco. Marco, this is Lena Hart. Isn't she lovely? Girlfriend. The word hung in the air like an accusation. Marco moved forward, and Lena's body responded with a visceral awareness that terrified her. She could feel the heat of him as he approached, could smell the subtle scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, more dangerous. Lena. He extended his hand, and she had no choice but to take it. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot up her arm. Marco's hand was warm, calloused in unexpected places, strong without being aggressive. His fingers wrapped around hers, and Lena felt that touch everywhere, her entire body suddenly, acutely alive in a way it had never been. Marco. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. It's nice to meet you. Is it? The question was soft, almost inaudible, meant only for her. His thumb brushed across her knuckles, once deliberate, before he released her hand. Lena stepped back, her legs unsteady. She was dimly aware of Adrian moving closer, of Sophia chattering about the food being ready, of the sounds of the family gathering in the dining room. But all of it felt distant, muffled, like she was underwater. Marco stepped back as well, his expression carefully neutral now, almost cold. But his eyes, those dark, dangerous eyes, burned with something that made Lena's stomach clench with equal parts terror and longing. "Adrian," he said, finally looking at his brother. "Good to see you." "Marco." Adrian's voice was tight, controlled in a way Lena had never heard before. His hand found her waist, possessive, claiming, "I'm glad you could make it. Lena and I have been looking forward to this." We. Lena and I. Adrian was drawing lines, establishing boundaries, making it clear where everyone stood. And Marco just smiled, a small, knowing curve of his lips that held no warmth whatsoever. "I wouldn't miss it," Marco said. "Family dinner is sacred, right, Mama?" "Right," Sophia clapped her hands together. "Now everyone to the table before the food gets cold. Lena, you sit next to Adrian, of course. Marco, you're at the other end with your Uncle Frank." The seating arrangement should have provided distance, safety. But as Lena settled into her chair with Adrian's hand resting proprietarily on her thigh, she found she could feel Marco's presence like a physical weight. He was at the far end of the long table, surrounded by cousins and uncles, appearing to listen to some animated story about a construction job gone wrong. But every few minutes, his gaze would drift to her. Brief glances that lasted only seconds, but each one landed on Lena's skin like a brand. She tried to focus on Adrian, on the kindness in his eyes as he explained various family members and their roles. She tried to eat Sophia's incredible food, to laugh at the uncle's jokes, to participate in the warm chaos of a big family dinner. But she was aware, with every breath, every heartbeat, of the man at the other end of the table. This was wrong. This was so profoundly wrong that Lena wanted to stand up, make some excuse, and run from this house and never look back. She had no right to feel this pull toward a man she'd just met. She had no right to betray Adrian's trust, his kindness, even in the privacy of her own treacherous thoughts. And yet, when Marco stood to help clear the dishes, his sleeve rolled to his forearm, Lena's eyes traced the movement of muscle beneath tanned skin. When he laughed at something his mother said, a real laugh, unexpected and transformative, Lena felt the sound in her chest like a physical ache. When he moved through the room with that controlled grace, like violence barely contained, she had to grip her wine glass to keep her hands from shaking. "You okay?" Adrian murmured in her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "You seem tense." "I'm fine," Lena lied, forcing a smile. "Just a little overwhelmed. Your family is wonderful." "They can be a lot." Adrian's hand squeezed her knee. "But they already love you. I can tell." Guilt twisted in Lena's stomach, sharp and merciless. Adrian deserved better than this. He deserved someone who could sit at his family's table without fantasizing about his brother, someone who could accept his affection without comparing it to the dark promise in Marco's eyes. After dinner, the family dispersed into comfortable chaos, some settling in the living room for coffee and dessert, others drifting out to the backyard where the younger cousins kicked a soccer ball in the fading light. Lena volunteered to help in the kitchen, desperate for a task, for something to occupy her hands and mind. She was elbow-deep in sudsy water, scrubbing a baking dish with more force than necessary, when she felt him approach. She didn't have to turn around to know it was Marco. Her entire body was attuned to his presence now, humming with awareness. "You don't have to do that," he said from behind her. "You're a guest." "I don't mind." Lena kept her eyes on the dish. "I like being useful." "Do you?" The question hung in the air, loaded with meaning she didn't want to examine. Lena rinsed the pan and set it in the drying rack with careful precision before finally turning to face him. Marco stood in the doorway of the kitchen, backlit by the setting sun streaming through the windows. He'd removed his jacket and tie, unbuttoned the top buttons of his white shirt. The casual dishevelment somehow made him more dangerous, more real. "Adrian seems happy," Marco said, his voice carefully neutral. "He doesn't bring women to family dinners. You must be special." "He's a good man," Lena replied, hating how defensive she sounded. "He is." Marco moved closer, and Lena's back hit the counter behind her. "Adrian's the best man I know. Kind, patient, honest. Everything I'm not." "I don't—" You felt it too. It wasn't a question. Marco stopped just outside her personal space, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, but not touching. Never touching. When I walked into that kitchen, you felt it. Lena's heart was racing so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. I don't know what you're talking about. Liar. The word was soft, almost affectionate. You're a terrible liar, Lena Hart. It's one of the first things I noticed about you. Stop. Her voice came out as a whisper. Please stop. Why? Marco's eyes searched her face with an intensity that made her want to look away and lean closer all at once. Because you're with my brother? Because this is wrong? Because you know that if I touched you right now, everything would change. Yes. To all of it, yes. Marco. Adrian's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He stood in the kitchen doorway, his face carefully blank in a way that suggested he'd seen or heard more than he wanted to. Mama's asking for you, something about the espresso maker. Marco stepped back smoothly, his expression shifting to pleasant neutrality so quickly that Lena wondered if she'd imagined the raw hunger in his eyes moments before. Of course. He moved past his brother without another word, without a single glance back at Lena. The silence he left behind was deafening. Adrian walked slowly into the kitchen, his hands in his pockets, his eyes on the floor. When he finally looked at Lena, she saw the hurt there, carefully controlled but unmistakable. I should have warned you, he said quietly. About Marco. About what he's like. Adrian? No, let me finish. He held up a hand, his smile sad and knowing. Marco has this effect on people, especially women. He walks into a room and it's like gravity shifts. I've seen it my whole life. He trailed off, shaking his head. I hoped it would be different with you. Lena's throat burned with shame and unshed tears. Nothing happened. I know. Adrian's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. I trust you, Lena. And I trust Marco in his own way. He won't act on it. He has his own code, his own rules. And you're with me, which means you're off limits. Marco would never cross that line. Then why does it feel like he already did? The question escaped before Lena could stop it. Adrian flinched just slightly, and she wanted to take it back, to swallow the words and pretend they'd never been spoken. Because wanting is almost as powerful as having, Adrian said after a long moment. Sometimes more powerful. Marco knows that better than anyone. He stepped forward and took her hands in his touch warm and safe and achingly familiar after only 3 weeks. Lena wanted to pull away. She wanted to lean in. She wanted to feel for Adrian what she'd felt the moment Marco Russo looked at her, but wanting wasn't enough to make it real. I'm falling for you, Lena, Adrian said, his voice steady despite the pain in his eyes. I've been falling since that first coffee date when you spent 20 minutes explaining the philosophy behind vinyasa flow like it was the most important thing in the world. You're smart and kind, and you make me want to be better. I don't want to lose you before we've even really started. I don't want to hurt you. Lena's voice cracked on the words. Adrian, I deserve honesty. He squeezed her hands gently. So I'm going to be honest with you. Marco is dangerous, not just in the way you're thinking, though that too. My brother lives in a world that you don't understand, that I've spent my whole life trying to separate myself from. The family business isn't just construction and real estate. There's a reason Marco drives a car that costs more than most people's houses. There's a reason men step aside when he walks through a room. Lena's stomach clenched with a new kind of fear. What are you saying? I'm saying that my family, our family, has connections. Legitimate businesses, yes, but other things too. Things that exist in the shadows. Marco runs those things. He's the heir to an empire that you don't want any part of. The words should have terrified her. They should have been a warning, a reason to walk away from this entire situation, from both Russo brothers and their complicated, dangerous family. Instead, they explained everything, the intensity in Marco's eyes, the controlled violence in the way he moved, the deference the family showed him, the way they stepped aside when he entered a room. Marco Russo wasn't just dangerous in the way that all beautiful, powerful men were dangerous. He was actually dangerous. I need to go, Lena said suddenly, pulling her hands free from Adrian's. I'm sorry. I need some air. Let me drive you home. No. The word came out too sharp, too panicked. Lena forced herself to breathe, to gentle her voice. No, I'll call a car. I just need some space to think. Is that okay? Adrian's face shuddered, but he nodded. Of course. I'll tell Mama you weren't feeling well. She'll understand. Lena gathered her things in a blur of motion, accepting Sophia's concerned hugs and promises to send her home with leftovers, deflecting questions with vague mentions of a headache. Through it all, she was aware of Marco's absence, of the way he'd disappeared into some other part of the house after their encounter in the kitchen. She was almost to the front door when his voice stopped her. Lena. She turned despite herself. Marco stood at the top of the stairs, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't read. It was nice to meet you, he said, the words formal, perfectly appropriate. But his eyes told a different story. His eyes said, this isn't over. Lena didn't trust herself to speak. She just nodded and fled into the cooling evening air. The Uber ride back to Brooklyn passed in a fog. Lena stared out the window at the passing lights of the city, her mind replaying every moment, every glance, every word. The feeling of Marco's hand touching hers. The heat in his eyes. The careful way Adrian had tried to warn her away from something he'd already seen happening. She'd flirted with the wrong brother. The thought crystallized in her mind with devastating clarity. Adrian was safe, kind, everything she'd convinced herself she wanted. But Marco was the match to kindling she hadn't known she was carrying. One look and she'd gone up in flames. And the worst part? She knew, with bone-deep certainty, that Marco had felt it too. Lena let herself into her apartment and stood in the center of her small living room, surrounded by the carefully curated calm she'd built over years of discipline and control. Cream-colored walls, minimal furniture, plants thriving in their designated spaces. Everything in her life had a place, a purpose, a reason. Except this. Except the way her body still hummed with awareness of a man she had no right to want. Except the knowledge that she'd just met someone who could unravel everything she'd built with a single touch. Her phone buzzed, a text from Adrian. I hope you feel better. We don't have to talk about tonight if you don't want to. I just want you to know that I'm not giving up on us. Whatever happens, I'm not giving up. Tears burned in Lena's eyes. She sank onto her couch, phone clutched in her hands, and let herself acknowledge the terrible truth she'd been avoiding since the moment Marco Russo walked into that kitchen. She didn't deserve Adrian's patience. She didn't deserve his kindness. Because even as she read his message, even as guilt twisted her stomach into knots, all she could think about was the man at the other end of that dinner table. The wrong brother. The dangerous one. The one whose single look had done more than 3 weeks of gentle courtship ever could. Outside her window, Brooklyn hummed with Sunday evening life. Couples walking home from dinner, families settling in for the night, the ordinary rhythms of ordinary people living ordinary lives. Lena had worked so hard to be one of them, to build a life free from chaos and drama and the kind of passionate destruction that had defined her parents' marriage. But as she sat alone in her carefully ordered apartment, her body still remembering the heat of Marco's presence, she had to face the possibility that some fires couldn't be prevented. They could only be survived or surrendered to. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Lena's heart stopped as she opened the message. Your yoga studio. Tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to talk. She should delete it. She should block the number. She should text Adrian right now and confess everything, end this before it began, walk away from both Russo brothers and their dangerous, complicated world. Instead, Lena stared at the message until her vision blurred, her thumb hovering over the keyboard, torn between typing no and typing nothing at all. Because saying no would be a lie. And Lena Hart, for all her discipline and control, was discovering that she was a terrible liar, especially to herself. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay in her bed watching shadows move across the ceiling, her phone on the nightstand like a loaded weapon. The message from Marco glowed in her mind even with her eyes closed. Your yoga studio, tomorrow, 7 a.m. We need to talk. She could still refuse. She could text back right now and tell him no, that there was nothing to discuss. that she was with Adrian, and whatever he thought had happened between them in that kitchen was a mistake. She could be strong, disciplined, the woman she'd spent years becoming. But at 6:15 in the morning, Lena found herself downstairs in her studio, turning on lights with shaking hands. She told herself she was being rational, adult about this. They did need to talk. They needed to establish boundaries, to clear the air, to make sure nothing like yesterday ever happened again. The lies we tell ourselves, she thought, are always the most dangerous ones. She didn't bother changing out of her sleep shorts and oversized sweatshirt, didn't put on makeup or brush her hair beyond pulling it into a messy knot. If Marco wanted to talk, he could talk to the real her, rumpled, uncertain, human. At exactly 7 o'clock, his shadow appeared on the other side of the studio's frosted glass door. Lena's breath caught. She counted to 5, then 10, trying to steady herself before crossing the room and unlocking the door. The morning air was cool against her bare legs as she pulled it open. Marco looked like he hadn't slept either. He wore dark jeans and a black Henley, his hair slightly disheveled, a shadow of stubble darkening his jaw. The expensive suit from yesterday was gone, replaced by something more casual, more real. Somehow it made him even more dangerous. "You came," he said, his voice rough with something that might have been relief. "You asked me to." Lena stepped aside to let him enter, hyper-aware of how empty the studio was, how alone they were. "Though I'm not sure why. Adrian already warned me about you." "Did he?" Marco moved into the center of the room, his eyes scanning the space. The mirrors, the props lined neatly along one wall, the morning light filtering through the windows. "What did he say?" "That you're dangerous, that your family business involves things I don't want to know about, that I should stay away from you." Lena crossed her arms over her chest, suddenly conscious of how little she was wearing. "He was trying to protect me. Adrian's good at that, protecting people." Marco turned to face her, and the intensity in his gaze made her take an involuntary step back. "It's who he is. The good brother. The safe choice. The man who'll treat you right and never push you further than you want to go. And you're not that man." "No." The word was simple, honest, devastating. "I'm not. I'm the brother my father groomed to take over the parts of the family business that require a harder edge. I make decisions that keep people up at night. I do things that would horrify someone like you, someone good, someone trying to build a peaceful life." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Adrian was right to warn you. You should stay away from me." Lena's heart was hammering so hard she could barely hear her own thoughts. "Then why are you here?" "Because I'm also selfish." Marco moved closer, and this time Lena held her ground even as every instinct screamed at her to run. "Because I saw you yesterday, and I knew that I was going to ruin everything. My relationship with my brother, your chance at something good with him, the careful distance I've maintained from anything that could make me weak. I knew all of that, and I still couldn't stay away." "Marco, let me finish." His voice was low, urgent, like he'd been holding these words back all night and they were finally breaking free. "I watched you at that dinner table. I watched you try so hard to be present for Adrian, to smile at my mother's stories, to fit into our loud, complicated family. And I watched you feel me watching you, every time your breath caught, every time your hand tightened on your wine glass, every time you stopped yourself from looking in my direction." "Stop," Lena's voice shook. "You need to stop." "Why? Because it's the truth? Because we both know that whatever Adrian makes you feel, it's nothing compared to this?" Marco was close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the pulse beating at his throat. "I could see it in your eyes yesterday, the recognition, like you'd been waiting your whole life for someone to look at you the way I did." "That's not fair." Tears burned behind Lena's eyes. "Adrian is kind and patient, and you don't love him." Marco's hand came up, hovering near her face without touching. "You care about him, you want to love him, but you don't. Not the way you could, not the way he deserves." Lena closed her eyes, trying to block out the truth in his words. "Even if that's true, it doesn't matter. I won't do this to him. I won't be the person who destroys his trust because I can't control myself around his brother." "You think I want this?" Marco's laugh was bitter, self-deprecating. You think I want to betray the one person in my family who still believes I'm capable of good? Adrian's the better man, Lena. He always has been. He deserves happiness, deserves someone like you. I know that. I've known it since the moment I walked into that kitchen and saw you standing there like every answer to every question I didn't know I was asking. Then leave. The words came out as a whisper. If you know it's wrong, if you know it'll hurt him, then leave and let me try to make this work. I will. Marco's hand finally made contact, his fingers brushing against her cheek so gently it hurt. I'll walk out of here right now and never approach you again. I'll sit through every family dinner and watch Adrian fall more in love with you. I'll be the good older brother, the one who keeps his distance, the one who never crosses the line. Lena opened her eyes, and the raw pain in Marco's face nearly undid her. But I need you to tell me something first. His thumb traced the curve of her cheekbone, and Lena's entire body trembled with the effort of not leaning into his touch. I need you to look me in the eye and tell me you don't feel this. Tell me that when you go home at night, you're thinking about Adrian. Tell me that your body doesn't remember exactly where I was sitting at that table, that you didn't lie awake last night wondering what would happen if I touched you like this. He was killing her. Every word, every careful touch, every second of his presence in her carefully controlled space was dismantling the life she'd built brick by brick. I can't, Lena whispered, the admission breaking something inside her. I can't tell you that. Marco's eyes closed, his jaw clenching with what looked like physical pain. Then we're both damned. The space between them felt charged, electric, like the air before a lightning strike. Lena knew she should step back, should put distance between their bodies, should end this before it became something irreversible. But her feet wouldn't move. Her body had its own ideas about what it wanted, and it wanted this, wanted him, with a ferocity that terrified her. What do we do? She asked, hating how small her voice sounded. I don't know. Marco's hand dropped from her face, and the loss of contact felt like a physical wound. I've never been in this position before. I've never wanted something I couldn't have. I've never had to choose between what I want and what's right. Is that supposed to make me feel special? It's supposed to make you understand how serious this is. Marco stepped back, putting blessed distance between them, and Lena could finally breathe again. I don't do relationships, Lena. I don't do feelings or commitment, or any of the things that Adrian would give you without question. My life is complicated in ways you can't imagine. The things I do, the world I live in, it's not compatible with yoga studios and Sunday morning meditation. Then this conversation is pointless. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. You're telling me we can't have this, but you can't stay away. That's not fair to any of us. I know. Marco ran his hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. But I'm trying to be honest with you. Adrian would never tell you the full truth about our family, about what we really do. He'd protect you from it, keep you separate from that world. But if you're going to make a choice, any choice, you deserve to know what you're choosing. Fine. Lena lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. Tell me. Tell me everything Adrian won't. Marco studied her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his dark eyes. The Russo family has been in New York for 4 generations. My great-grandfather came over from Sicily with nothing and built an empire through blood and determination. Over the years, we've gone legitimate, mostly. Construction, real estate, restaurants. But there are still parts of the business that exist in the gray areas. Protection, gambling, favors owed and collected. You're telling me your family is in the mafia? Lena tried to keep her voice steady, tried to process this information like an adult, rather than someone whose entire worldview was being upended. That word doesn't mean what you think it means. Not anymore. We're not the Sopranos, Lena. We're businessmen who operate in spaces where the law is flexible. We protect our interests. We maintain order in communities where the police can't or won't. And yes, sometimes that requires methods that wouldn't hold up in a court of law. And you run that side of things. Yes. No shame, no apology. My father raised me for it. Adrian wanted out from the time he was 16, wanted to be clean, separate from the family business. My father let him go, but I stayed. I took over when my father died 5 years ago, and I've been running things ever since. Lena's mind reeled with the implications. Does Adrian know? About everything? Adrian knows enough to stay away. He coaches basketball, volunteers at youth centers, keeps his hands clean. He's the acceptable face of the Russo family, the proof that we're not all monsters. Marco's expression softened when he mentioned his brother. He's the best of us, Lena. He's what our family could have been if we'd made different choices generations ago. So you're telling me all this to convince me to stay with him? It wasn't a question. I'm telling you this so you understand what choosing me would mean. It wouldn't be yoga studios and quiet mornings. It would be danger, complications, a life where you'd constantly be looking over your shoulder. The rivals I have, the enemies my family has made, they wouldn't hesitate to use you against me. You'd become a liability, a weakness to be exploited. But Adrian's separate enough that dating him carries minimal risk. No one would bother targeting his girlfriend. You'd be safe with him, Lena, protected, free to live your life without fear. The silence that followed felt heavy, weighted with all the things neither of them was saying. Lena moved to the windows overlooking the street, watching early morning joggers and dog walkers go about their ordinary lives. How simple it must be, she thought, to want someone appropriate, to fall for the right person instead of the wrong one. You're trying to scare me off, she said finally. I'm trying to be honest. No, you're trying to make the choice for me. You're laying out all the reasons why this is impossible, why I should choose Adrian, why wanting you is dangerous and stupid and wrong. Lena turned to face him. But you're not actually leaving. You're still here, in my studio, telling me all the reasons we can't have this while looking at me like you're drowning and I'm air. Marco's expression flickered, surprise, admiration, something darker. What do you want me to say? I want you to be honest about what you want, not what's right or safe or what Adrian deserves. What do you want, Marco? The question hung between them like a dare. Marco crossed the room in 3 strides, and suddenly they were close again, too close, the air thick with everything they weren't allowed to feel. I want to be the kind of man who walks away, Marco said, his voice rough. I want to be noble enough to sacrifice what I want for my brother's happiness. I want to be strong enough to let you go. His hand came up, fingers threading through her hair. But I'm not. I'm selfish and possessive, and when I see something I want, I take it. And God help me, Lena, I want you in ways that should be illegal. Lena's breath stopped. Marco. But more than that, I want you to have a choice, a real choice, not one I've manipulated or forced. So I'm going to leave now. I'm going to give you time to think, to really consider what kind of life you want. And if you choose Adrian, if you decide that safe and kind and uncomplicated is what you need, I'll respect that. I'll find a way to live with it. And if I don't? The question escaped before Lena could stop it. If I choose you? Marco's eyes darkened with something that looked like hunger and fear in equal measure. Then you need to understand that I don't do things halfway. If you choose me, you're mine, not in some romantic, poetic way. I mean, you become part of my world, my life, my responsibilities. I protect what's mine with everything I have, which means your freedom becomes limited. Your choices become complicated. Your peace becomes collateral damage. You make it sound like prison. Some people would call it that. Marco's thumb brushed across her bottom lip, and Lena's knees nearly gave out. Others would call it being cherished by someone who knows exactly how precious you are. Before Lena could respond, before she could process the implications of what he was offering and threatening in the same breath, Marco's phone buzzed. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and his entire demeanor shifted. The softness vanished, replaced by cold efficiency. I have to go, he said, already moving toward the door. Business. At 7 in the morning? My business doesn't keep regular hours. Marco paused at the door, his hand on the handle. Think about what I said, Lena. Really think about it. And whatever you decide, know that I'll respect your choice, even if it destroys me. Then he was gone, the door clicking shut behind him with finality. Lena stood alone in her studio, her body still humming with the ghost of his touch, her mind spinning with everything he'd told her. She should call Adrian, she should confess everything that had just happened, lay it all out, and let him make the choice for her. End this before anyone got hurt worse than they already were. Instead, she sank onto her yoga mat and tried to find center, tried to reconnect with the discipline and control that had defined her life for so long. But her body wouldn't cooperate. Her mind kept replaying Marco's words, his touch, the raw honesty in his eyes when he'd admitted he wanted her. Her phone buzzed. Adrian. Good morning, beautiful. Coffee later? I want to talk about yesterday. I know it was overwhelming, but I promise we're not all as intense as Marco. Guilt crashed over Lena in waves. Sweet, patient Adrian, who had no idea his brother had been in her studio 20 minutes ago, touching her face, offering her a life that would destroy everything she'd built. Coffee sounds perfect, she typed back, each word feeling like a betrayal. The day passed in a blur of classes and polite conversations with students who had no idea their instructor was falling apart from the inside out. Lena moved through sun salutations and warrior poses, adjusted alignments and offered gentle corrections, all while her mind circled the same impossible question: what did she actually want? Adrian met her at their usual coffee shop at 3, and the sight of his warm smile made Lena's stomach clench with fresh guilt. He'd brought her favorite chai latte without being asked, remembered that she took it with oat milk and honey. Hey, he said, pulling her into a gentle hug. How are you feeling? Better than yesterday? Much better. Another lie. Lena was becoming fluent in them. I'm sorry I ran out like that. Your family is wonderful, but it was a lot all at once. I know. I should have prepared you better. Adrian gestured to a quiet corner table, and they settled in with their drinks. I wanted to talk about Marco. Lena's heart stopped. What about him? I saw how he looked at you yesterday, and I saw how it affected you. Adrian's voice was gentle, understanding, which somehow made everything worse. I'm not angry, Lena. I know my brother. I know what he's like, the effect he has on people. But I need you to understand something important. Okay. Marco is incapable of the kind of relationship you deserve. It's not that he doesn't want it. I actually think he might, with you. But his life doesn't allow for it. The things he's involved in, the enemies he's made, the constant danger, it would consume you. I've watched it happen to other women who thought they could handle loving him. What happened to them? Lena asked, not sure she wanted to know. Some left, some stayed and lost themselves trying to fit into his world. Adrian paused, pain flickering across his face. One got hurt because someone wanted to get to Marco. She survived, but she was never the same. And Marco became even harder after that, even more closed off. He doesn't let people close anymore. Not really. The information should have been a warning, should have been the final piece of evidence Lena needed to make the rational choice. Instead, it just made her understand Marco better, the careful distance he maintained, the way he tried to scare her off this morning. I'm not trying to control you, Adrian continued. I just need you to have all the information, because I'm falling in love with you, Lena. These past 3 weeks have been the happiest I've been in years, and I hope that you feel something for me too. Maybe not as intense as whatever happened when you met Marco, but something real, something that could grow into love if we give it time. Adrian, Lena's throat burned with tears she couldn't shed. You're one of the best men I've ever met. You're kind and patient, and you make me feel safe in ways I've never felt before. But I don't know if safe is what I need. The admission broke something in Lena's chest. I spent my whole life running from intensity, from passion, from anything that felt like it could spiral out of control. My parents had this volatile, destructive love that poisoned everything around it, and I swore I'd never be like them, never choose drama over stability. That's a good instinct. Adrian reached across the table and took her hand. Drama isn't sustainable, Lena. Intensity burns out. What you need is partnership, mutual respect, someone who'll be there when the initial excitement fades. I know, logically, I know that. Lena squeezed his hand, willing herself to feel for him what she'd felt in that kitchen with Marco. You're everything I should want. Should want. Adrian's smile was sad, knowing. That's the problem, isn't it? You should want me, but you want him. The truth hung between them, ugly and undeniable. Lena wanted to deny it, to protest that she just needed more time, that her feelings for Adrian would deepen if she could just get Marco out of her head. But she'd already told enough lies. She owed Adrian honesty, at least. I'm so sorry, she whispered. Don't be. Adrian's voice was strained but steady. You can't control who you're attracted to. And honestly, part of me saw this coming. I just hoped I was wrong. He pulled his hand back, wrapping it around his coffee cup. What are you going to do? I don't know. Marco made it very clear this morning that choosing him would mean giving up everything I've built. Peace, safety, the quiet life I've worked so hard to create. He practically ordered me to choose you. He did? Something like surprise crossed Adrian's face. Marco told you to stay away from him? He laid out every reason why we couldn't work, why you were the better choice, why I'd be safer, happier with you. Lena laughed, the sound hollow. He was very convincing, almost like he'd practiced it. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his expression complicated. That's more than I expected from him. Marco usually takes what he wants without thinking about consequences. If he's trying to push you toward me, he must really care about you. Or maybe he's finally learning to put someone else first. Does that change anything? I don't know. Adrian met her eyes, and Lena saw her own confusion reflected there. I want to fight for you, Lena. I want to believe that we could build something real if Marco wasn't in the picture. But I also know that you can't choose someone because they're the right choice on paper. Love doesn't work that way. I don't love him. The words came out defensive, too quick. I barely know him. Maybe not yet, but you could. That's what scares me most. Not that you're attracted to my brother, but that you could actually fall for him. And if that happens, if you choose him, I need to know now. Because I can't invest more of my heart into this if I'm just the placeholder until you're brave enough to admit what you really want. The ultimatum was gentle but firm, and Lena respected Adrian even more for it. He deserved better than someone who was torn, someone who couldn't give him her whole heart, because half of it was already reaching toward his brother. I need time, Lena said finally. Time to think, to figure out what I actually want versus what I think I should want. Is that fair to you? Probably not. Adrian's smile was crooked, pained. But I'll give it to you anyway, because despite everything, I still believe you're worth waiting for. They parted with a hug that felt like goodbye, even though neither of them said the word. Lena walked back to her studio through the cooling autumn evening, her mind churning with impossible choices and dangerous wants. Her phone buzzed just as she reached her door. Unknown number again, but she knew before opening it who the message would be from. I meant what I said this morning. The choice is yours, but you should know, rival families are asking questions about Adrian's new girlfriend. Word travels fast in our world. Even choosing him isn't as safe as it used to be. Lena stared at the message, her blood running cold. Was Marco threatening her? Warning her? Both? She typed back before she could overthink it. Are you trying to scare me into choosing you or away from you? I can't tell anymore. The response came immediately. Neither. I'm telling you the truth. You walked into our world yesterday, and now people are watching. Whatever you choose, you need to be prepared for the consequences. That's not a threat. It's a fact. And if I choose to walk away from both of you... This time, the pause was longer. Lena watched the 3 dots appear and disappear several times before Marco's response finally came through. Then I'll make sure you can do that safely. But you need to decide soon, Lena. Every day you're caught between us makes you more of a target. Our enemies don't care about your intentions. They only see weakness to exploit. This is insane. I'm just a yoga instructor. I'm nobody. You stopped being nobody the moment you walked into my mother's house on Adrian's arm. Welcome to the Russo family, Lena. Even leaving has consequences now. Lena sank onto her apartment steps, her legs unable to carry her any further. This was supposed to be simple. Meet a nice man, have a normal relationship, build a life that was calm and predictable. Instead, she'd stumbled into a world of dangerous men and impossible choices, where even walking away carried risks. Her phone rang. Maya's name flashed on the screen, and Lena answered with something close to desperation. Please tell me you're free for wine and terrible decisions, Lena said without preamble. Always. What happened? I met someone. Adrian? Yeah, you mentioned him. Sounds nice and boring, which is exactly your type. Not Adrian, his brother. Lena climbed the stairs to her apartment, already pulling out glasses. I met his brother And Maya, I can't breathe when he's in the room. I can't think. It's like my entire body just lights up, and every rational thought I've ever had disappears. Oh, honey. Maya's voice was equal parts sympathetic and amused. You've got it bad. Tell me everything. And she did. Sitting on her couch with a glass of wine she barely touched, Lena told Maya everything. The dinner, the kitchen encounter, Marco showing up at her studio, Adrian's gentle understanding, the messages warning her about danger and choices and consequences. So let me get this straight, Maya said when Lena finally ran out of words. You've got the nice brother who's perfect for you, and the dangerous brother who you can't stop thinking about. And the dangerous brother is actually in some kind of crime family? Apparently. And you're seriously considering choosing the mobster over the basketball coach. When you say it like that, it sounds insane. Because it is insane, Maya laughed, but not unkindly. Lena, you've spent your entire adult life building walls against exactly this kind of chaos. Your parents' relationship was a train wreck of passion and volatility. You swore you'd never repeat their mistakes. And now you're telling me you want to jump into a relationship with a man who literally runs an organized crime family? I know. I know it's everything I said I didn't want. But Maya, when I'm with Adrian, I keep thinking about Marco. And when I think about never seeing Marco again, I can't breathe. That's not love, sweetie. That's obsession, or attraction, or chemistry. But it's not a foundation for a relationship. Then why does it feel like Marco's the only person who actually sees me? Adrian sees who he wants me to be, calm, centered, safe. But Marco sees all of it, all the messy, complicated parts I try to hide, and he doesn't look away. Maya was quiet for a moment. Okay, real talk time. Do you actually want Marco, or do you want to prove to yourself that you're not afraid of intensity anymore? The question hit Lena like a physical blow. I don't know, maybe both? Then you need to figure that out before you make any choices. Because choosing a man, any man, to prove something to yourself is a disaster waiting to happen. And choosing the dangerous option because it feels like conquering your fears, that's just self-destruction with better packaging. You're right. Lena drained her wine glass, wincing at the bitterness. You're absolutely right. I need to figure out what I actually want, separate from all the drama and intensity and fear. Good. Now tell me more about this Marco. Is he at least hot? Despite everything, Lena laughed. She spent the next hour describing Marco in detail. The dark eyes, the controlled violence in how he moved, the way his voice dropped when he'd admitted he wanted her. Maya listened with appropriate appreciation and occasional warnings about red flags, but mostly she just let Lena talk herself in circles. By the time Maya left, Lena felt marginally more clear-headed. She needed space from both brothers, needed time to remember who she was without their competing gravitational pulls. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. The brick came through her studio window at 2 a.m. The sound of shattering glass jerked Lena awake with a violence that had her heart slamming against her ribs before her mind could catch up. She sat bolt upright in bed, her body flooded with adrenaline, trying to orient herself in the darkness. The crash had come from downstairs, from her studio. Lena grabbed her phone with shaking hands, her first instinct to call 911. But something stopped her, some primitive survival instinct that said calling the police might make things worse. Marco's words echoed in her mind. You walked into our world yesterday, and now people are watching. Instead, she pulled on yoga pants and crept toward her apartment door, every nerve ending screaming at her to stay hidden. Through the floor, she could hear nothing. No footsteps, no voices, just the eerie silence that followed destruction. Whoever had thrown the brick was already gone. Lena descended the stairs on silent feet, her phone clutched like a weapon. The studio door was still locked from the inside, which meant the damage was limited to the window. She flipped on the lights, and her breath caught at the scene. The large front window was destroyed, glass scattered across the hardwood floor like deadly diamonds. And in the center of the destruction, wrapped around a brick, was a piece of paper secured with rubber bands. Lena's hands trembled as she picked up the brick, careful to avoid the glass shards. She unwrapped the paper, her stomach churning with dread even before she read the message scrawled in thick black marker. Stay away from the Russos, or next time it's more than glass. She stared at the words until they blurred, her mind struggling to process this new reality. Less than 48 hours ago, her biggest problem had been choosing between two men. Now someone was threatening her with violence, destroying her business, turning her safe space into a crime scene. Lena's phone was in her hand before she consciously decided to call him. It rang once before Marco answered, his voice sharp with alertness despite the late hour. "Lena, what's wrong?" "Someone threw a brick through my studio window." Her voice sounded distant, disconnected, like it belonged to someone else. "There's a note. It says to stay away from the Russos, or next time it's more than glass." The silence on the other end was deadly. When Marco spoke again, his voice had gone cold, flat, terrifying in its control. "Don't touch anything else. Don't call the police. I'm 10 minutes away." "How did you know where—" "10 minutes, Lena. Lock your apartment door and stay upstairs until I get there." He hung up before she could respond. Lena stood in the center of her destroyed studio, glass crunching under her bare feet, and tried to process the fact that Marco had known her address without being told. Of course he did. Men like Marco Russo didn't leave things to chance. She retreated upstairs as instructed, her body moving on autopilot while her mind raced. This was real. The danger Marco had warned her about wasn't some distant theoretical threat. It was a brick through her window, a promise of violence, her peaceful life shattering as literally as the glass downstairs. Lena should have been terrified, and part of her was, that primal animal part that recognized mortal danger. But beneath the fear was something else, something that felt uncomfortably like vindication. Marco had tried to warn her. He told her that even choosing Adrian wasn't safe anymore, that stepping into their world had consequences. She thought he was being dramatic, overprotective, trying to manipulate her choice. She'd been wrong. The sound of a car pulling up fast made Lena move to her window. Marco's black sedan, the same one she'd noticed at his mother's house, was parked at an aggressive angle in front of her studio. He emerged with two other men, both large and intimidating, moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who'd done this before. Marco looked up, found her window, and the expression on his face made Lena's breath catch. She'd seen him intense, seen him controlled, seen him struggling with desire. But this was something else entirely. This was Marco Russo as he existed in his real world, cold, calculating, dangerous. She met him at the studio door, unlocking it before he could knock. Marco swept past her, his eyes scanning the destruction with professional detachment. The two men with him fanned out, checking the back entrance and the street outside. "Tell me exactly what happened," Marco said, his voice still that deadly calm. Lena recounted the sequence, the crash, her decision not to call the police, finding the note. Marco listened without interrupting, his jaw tight, his hands clenched at his sides like he was physically restraining himself from violence. "Let me see the note." She handed him the brick and paper, watching as he examined both with careful attention. His eyes darkened as he read the message, and Lena saw a muscle jump in his jaw. "Do you recognize the handwriting?" she asked. "No, but I recognize the message. This is a warning from the Castellanos, a rival family that's been pushing against our territory for months." Marco looked up, and the fury in his eyes was banked but unmistakable. "They must have heard about you through their network. Probably saw you at Sunday dinner, did some digging, figured out you were connected to both me and Adrian. So they're using me to get to you." "Yes." The word was clipped, brutal in its honesty. "This is exactly what I tried to warn you about. You're not just a woman I'm interested in anymore. You're leverage, a pressure point, a way to hurt the Russo family." One of Marco's men appeared in the doorway. Streets clear, no witnesses. They were professionals, in and out fast, probably watching to make sure she was alone. "Get cameras installed on this building by morning," Marco ordered. "Front, back, and side angles. And I want someone watching this street 24/7 until we resolve the Castellano situation." "Marco, I can't afford—" "I'm not asking you to pay for it." Marco's attention was absolute, intense. "You're under my protection now, whether you like it or not. That means cameras, surveillance, armed guards, if necessary." "I don't want armed guards at my yoga studio." Lena's voice rose with a hysteria she couldn't quite control. "I don't want any of this. I just wanted to date a nice man and live my quiet life, and now someone's throwing bricks through my window because I had dinner with your family." "I know." Marco's voice softened fractionally. I know this isn't fair. I know you didn't ask for this. But it's the reality now, and we have to deal with it. How? How do we deal with someone threatening to hurt me because of who I know? I handle the Castellanos. You decide whether you're strong enough to survive what comes next. Marco stepped closer, and even furious and terrified, Lena felt that magnetic pull. Because I meant what I said this morning. The choice is still yours, but now you know what that choice cost. Lena's laugh was sharp, bitter. Some choice, stay away from your family and still get threatened, or choose one of you and become a permanent target. Or I remove the threat entirely. Marco's voice dropped to something dark, promising violence. I can end the Castellano problem. I can make sure no one ever touches you or threatens you again. But that means going to war, Lena. It means blood and consequences and all the things I've tried to keep away from the legitimate parts of my family. Don't. The word came out as a whisper. Don't start a war over me. I'm not worth that. That's not your decision to make. Marco's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about this moment. You became worth it the moment I decided you were mine to protect. I'm not yours. I haven't chosen anything yet. Haven't you? Marco's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Lena hated how her body leaned into his touch despite everything. You called me, Lena. Not the police, not Adrian, me, because some part of you already knows who you trust to keep you safe. The truth of his words hit harder than the brick through her window. She had called Marco without hesitation, had known instinctively that he was the one who could handle this. Not because Adrian wasn't capable, but because Marco lived in this world of threats and violence and immediate action. This is insane, Lena said, but she didn't pull away from his touch. Everything about this situation is completely insane. Yes. Marco's other hand came up, framing her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. But it's the reality now. So tell me what you want me to do. Do you want me to de-escalate with the Castellanos, try to smooth this over without violence? Or do you want me to make absolutely certain that no one ever threatens you again? I don't want anyone to die because of me. That's not what I asked. Marco's voice was patient but firm. I asked what you want, not what you think is morally right or what would make you feel less guilty. What do you actually want, Lena? She looked up at him, this dangerous man who'd turned her life upside down in less than 2 days, and felt something inside her crack wide open. All her life, she'd been making the safe choice, the rational choice, the choice that minimized risk and drama. And where had it gotten her? Standing in a destroyed studio with glass in her hair and fear in her throat. I want to feel safe, Lena said finally. I want to sleep at night without wondering if someone's going to hurt me because I went to a family dinner. I want my life back. Then let me give that to you. Marco's voice was soft, persuasive, dangerous in its promise. Let me handle this my way, and I swear to you that the Castellanos will never bother you again. Your way means violence. My way means efficiency. The Castellanos sent this message because they think you're a soft target, that threatening you will make me weak or distracted. I need to send a message back that you're off limits, permanently. Lena closed her eyes, trying to reconcile the man holding her face with tenderness with the man promising calculated violence. And if I say no? If I tell you to handle this without bloodshed? Then I'll try. But I can't guarantee your safety that way. Negotiations take time, and during that time the Castellanos might escalate. They might decide to make good on their threat. Marco's hands tightened slightly on her face. I won't risk you to maintain the moral high ground, Lena. If it comes down to your safety or their lives, there's no choice to make. The apartment door burst open, and Adrian stormed in, his face pale with fury and fear. Lena, I just got Marco's text about... He stopped short, taking in the scene. Lena in Marco's arms, their faces inches apart, the intimacy of the moment unmistakable. Adrian, Marco didn't step back, didn't release Lena. I was going to call you after I secured the situation. Secured the situation? Adrian's voice shook with barely controlled anger. Someone threatened her, Marco. Someone from our world came after her because of us, and you're standing here holding her like... He cut himself off, running his hands through his hair. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Lena finally pulled away from Marco, her body immediately missing his warmth despite the chaos of the moment. I'm okay, Adrian. Shaken, but okay. You're not okay. None of this is okay. Adrian moved toward her but stopped when Marco shifted almost imperceptibly, placing himself between them. The movement was subtle, protective, possessive, and it didn't go unnoticed. Back off, Marco, Adrian said, his voice low and warning. This is your fault. Your enemies, your violence spilling over onto someone innocent. You don't get to play protector now. Someone had to protect her. Where were you when her window was being smashed? I was at home, asleep, like a normal person, because I'm not the one who invited danger into her life. Adrian's voice rose, his usual calm completely shattered. I told you to stay away from her. I told you she deserved better than this. And I agreed with you. Marco's voice was deadly quiet. I tried to push her toward you. I gave her every reason to choose the safe option. But the Castellanos don't care about our family drama, Adrian. They saw an opening and they took it. This would have happened whether I stayed away or not. That's not true and you know it. If you hadn't looked at her like she was... Adrian stopped himself, shaking his head. It doesn't matter now. What matters is keeping Lena safe and ending this before it gets worse. Agreed. Which is why I'm going to deal with the Castellanos tonight. No. Adrian stepped forward, his jaw set. You're not starting a war over this. We'll handle it the right way, through proper channels, negotiations, mediators. There's no time for proper channels. They threatened her, Adrian. They're watching her. Every day we waste on diplomacy is another day they might decide to escalate. So your solution is to what? Kill them all? Prove that the Russo family is just as brutal and reckless as everyone thinks we are? The brothers faced each other across Lena's destroyed studio, years of tension and unspoken resentment crackling between them. Lena watched, feeling simultaneously like she was watching something deeply private and like she was the epicenter of an earthquake she hadn't asked for. Can both of you please stop? Lena's voice cut through their argument. Stop fighting over the best way to protect me like I'm not standing right here. This is my life, my business, my choice about how to handle this. Lena! Both brothers started simultaneously, then stopped, glaring at each other. No, let me finish. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how little she was wearing, how vulnerable she looked in yoga pants and a tank top with glass scattered around her bare feet. Adrian's right that I didn't ask for this, that I'm an innocent person caught in the middle of something I don't understand, but Marco's right that we don't have time to waste on negotiations that might not work. So what do you want us to do? Adrian asked, his voice gentling. I want honesty from both of you. Lena looked between them, these two men who'd somehow become the axis her world spun on in less than 48 hours. Marco, if you handle this your way, what actually happens? Not the sanitized version, the truth. Marco's expression was carefully neutral. I reach out to the Castellano leadership through back channels. I make it clear that you're under my personal protection and any further threats against you will be considered a declaration of war against the entire Russo family. If they're smart, they'll back off immediately. If they're not, he paused, then I'll need to make an example. An example meaning killing someone, meaning demonstrating that the cost of threatening what's mine is higher than they're willing to pay. Marco's voice was matter-of-fact, like they were discussing business strategy rather than murder. It doesn't have to be lethal, but it has to be memorable. Lena turned to Adrian. And your way? I contact the mediators both families use for disputes. We lay out what happened, negotiate appropriate compensation for the threat, establish clear boundaries moving forward. It takes longer, but it doesn't risk escalating into open warfare. Adrian's voice was reasonable, measured. It's how civilized people handle conflicts. Except the Castellanos aren't civilized, Marco interjected. They're opportunistic predators who see weakness as an invitation. Mediation only works if both sides want peace. And your way only works if you're willing to sacrifice your humanity, Adrian shot back. There has to be a middle ground, Marco. There has to be a way to protect Lena without becoming the monster everyone already thinks you are. Something flickered in Marco's eyes, pain maybe, or acknowledgement of a truth he'd been living with for years. I stopped caring what people think of me a long time ago. All I care about is results. That's the problem. Adrian's voice softened, became almost pleading. You've convinced yourself that the only way to protect people is through fear and violence. But there are other ways, Marco. Better ways. Name one that guarantees her safety tonight, right now, not in a week after mediation sessions and negotiated settlements. Tonight. Adrian opened his mouth to respond, then closed it, frustration evident on his face. Because they both knew there wasn't one. Marco's way was brutal but immediate. Adrian's way was civilized but slow. I need to think, Lena said finally. I need both of you to leave and let me process this without your competing intensities in the room. Can you do that? The brothers exchanged a long look, some wordless communication passing between them. Finally, Adrian nodded. I'll go. But I'm sleeping in my car outside, and I'm not leaving until we get proper security set up. I'll have my people handle security, Marco said. You should go home, Adrian. Get some rest. I'm not leaving her alone. She won't be alone. I'm staying. The air in the room crackled with tension. Lena felt the weight of unspoken history, of sibling rivalry and protective instincts, and the terrible knowledge that they were both right and both wrong. Neither of you is staying, Lena said firmly. I appreciate the concern, but I need space, real space, without Russo brothers hovering over me trying to prove who can protect me better. Lena, someone just threatened you, Adrian started. And someone will be watching the building all night, Marco finished, pulling out his phone. I'm texting my team now. You'll have eyes on your studio from every angle and armed backup 3 minutes away if anything happens. But if you want us to leave, we'll leave. Adrian looked like he wanted to argue, but the exhaustion on Lena's face must have convinced him. Okay, but please, call me if you need anything, even just to talk. I don't care what time it is. I will, Lena promised, though they both knew it was a lie. If something happened tonight, she'd call Marco. They all knew it. Adrian left first, pausing at the door to look back at his brother. Don't do anything stupid, Marco. Please. For once in your life, think about the consequences beyond immediate results. I always think about consequences. Marco's voice was quiet. That's why I'm good at what I do. After Adrian was gone, Marco lingered, his eyes studying Lena with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Are you sure you want me to leave? No, but I need you to anyway. Lena met his gaze steadily. Because every time you're in the room, I can't think straight. And I need to think, Marco. I need to figure out what I actually want versus what I've been conditioned to want versus what fear is making me choose. And if thinking leads you to choose Adrian, then you'll respect that choice. You promised. Lena wrapped her arms tighter around herself. Or was that a lie? I don't lie, Lena. Not to you. Marco moved toward the door, then paused. But I should warn you, choosing Adrian won't make you safer anymore. The Castellanos have already identified you as a Russo connection. Whether you're with me or my brother doesn't matter to them. You're leverage either way. So I'm trapped no matter what I choose. No. You're protected no matter what you choose. There's a difference. Marco's hand rested on the door handle. But if you choose Adrian, you'll be protected at a distance. Professional security, subtle surveillance, boundaries maintained. If you choose me, he trailed off, his jaw tight. If I choose you, what? Marco turned back to face her, and the raw honesty in his expression stole her breath. If you choose me, you'll never be alone again. Not in danger, not in fear, not in anything. I'll be there, Lena. Always. In ways that will probably feel suffocating at first, because I don't do anything halfway, and I sure as hell don't protect people I care about with anything less than everything I have. The promise should have terrified her. Instead, it resonated with something deep in Lena's chest, some part of her that had been lonely far longer than she'd admitted. Go, she whispered, because staying strong was taking everything she had. Please, Marco, just go. He did, but not before looking at her one more time with eyes that promised this conversation was far from over. Alone in her destroyed studio, Lena sank to the floor among the broken glass and let herself finally fall apart. She cried for her shattered peace, for the simple life she'd built that was now irreversibly complicated. She cried for Adrian's pain and Marco's intensity and her own treacherous heart that wanted the wrong things for all the wrong reasons. But underneath the tears was something else, something that felt uncomfortably like relief. Because for all the chaos and danger and impossible choices, at least she was finally feeling something real. The numbness that had characterized her carefully constructed life was gone, burned away by Marco Russo's dark eyes and dangerous promises. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 4 men watching your building. 2 on the street, 2 on the roof of the building across from yours. You're safe. Sleep if you can. M. A minute later, another text from Adrian. I know you said you wanted space, but I'm parked down the block. If you need me, I'm here. Lena looked at both messages. These 2 men who represented 2 completely different futures. Adrian parked outside to make sure she was safe, respecting her boundaries even as he worried. Marco deploying armed guards and surveillance, ensuring her safety through force and efficiency. Safe and suffocating, she thought. Those were her options. Safety through distance with Adrian or safety through possession with Marco. Unless there was a third option she wasn't seeing yet. Lena pulled herself together and climbed the stairs to her apartment. She showered away the glass dust and fear, changed into clean pajamas, and tried to sleep. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marco's face when he'd promised to protect her. Saw the pain in Adrian's eyes when he'd realized she'd called his brother first. At 4 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and made herself tea. The studio below was silent, the broken window covered with plywood that Marco's men must have installed while she was upstairs. Even in her demanded solitude, he was taking care of things, fixing problems, making her world safer whether she asked him to or not. Lena stood at her window watching the sun rise over Brooklyn, watching the city wake up around her, and made a decision. Not the safe one, not the smart one, but the honest one. She picked up her phone and typed a message before she could second-guess herself. I need to see you, both of you, together. There's something I need to say, and I need to say it to both of your faces. Adrian responded immediately. When and where? Marco's response took longer. This is a mistake. Whatever you're planning to say, you should say it separately. Adrian doesn't need to hear. Lena cut him off. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m., my studio. Both of you or neither of you. This is my choice to make, Marco. Let me make it my way. The silence from both brothers was deafening, but eventually both sent the same single word in response. Okay. Lena set down her phone and watched the sun climb higher, painting Brooklyn in shades of gold and pink. In less than 12 hours, she would have to choose. Not between safe and dangerous, not between should and want, but between 2 men who both deserved better than what she was about to do to them. Because the truth, the real truth that Lena had been avoiding since the moment Marco walked into that kitchen, was that she'd already made her choice. Her heart had made it the second his eyes locked with hers. Everything since then had just been her mind trying to catch up. The hours between dawn and 2 o'clock felt like walking through water. Lena taught her morning classes on autopilot, her body moving through familiar sequences while her mind rehearsed and abandoned a dozen different speeches. Her students noticed her distraction, offering concerned glances that she deflected with practiced smiles. The new window had been installed by 9. Marco's efficiency again, his protection extending even to the mundane details of glass replacement and insurance forms she hadn't asked about. Maya showed up at noon with coffee and the kind of direct eye contact that said she knew something serious was happening. You're about to do something monumentally stupid, aren't you? Maya asked, settling onto the bench that had somehow survived the previous night's destruction. Probably. Lena accepted the coffee gratefully, letting the warmth seep into her cold hands. I'm meeting with both of them in 2 hours. I'm going to tell them the truth. Which truth? The one where you choose the safe brother, or the one where you choose the dangerous one? The one where I'm honest about what I actually feel instead of what I think I should feel. Lena took a sip of coffee, the bitterness matching her mood. I've spent my entire adult life making the rational choice, Maya. Being careful, avoiding risk, building this perfect, controlled existence. And look where it got me. A brick through my window and 2 men I'm hurting by pretending I haven't already decided. Maya studied her friend with knowing eyes. You're choosing Marco. It wasn't a question. Lena nodded anyway, feeling the weight of the admission settle in her chest like stones. I know it's insane. I know everyone will think I've lost my mind. Hell, I think I've lost my mind. But when that brick came through the window, when I was scared and alone, it was Marco I called. Not the police, not even Adrian, who's been nothing but kind to me. Marco. Because some part of me already knew who I trusted to keep me safe. Safe is a relative term with a man who runs organized crime. I know, but it's not just about safety. Lena set down her coffee, wrapping her arms around herself. When I'm with Adrian, I feel calm, peaceful, like I could build the life I always thought I wanted. But when I'm with Marco, I feel alive in a way I've never felt before. Like every nerve ending is on fire. Like I'm finally awake after years of sleepwalking through my own existence. That's just chemistry, Lena. Attraction. It's not a foundation for a relationship. Maybe not. But I'm tired of building foundations on what I think I should want instead of what actually makes my heart race. Lena met her friend's eyes, pleading for understanding. My parents had this destructive, volatile love that ruined everything it touched, and I swore I'd never be like them, never choose passion over stability. But what if the lesson wasn't to avoid intensity altogether? What if it was just to choose intensity with the right person? Maya was quiet for a long moment, her expression complicated. And you think Marco is the right person? A man you've known for 3 days who's already had your window smashed in by his enemies? I don't know. Maybe I'm deluding myself. Maybe this is just my fear of boring stability dressed up as brave honesty. Lena's voice cracked slightly. But I know that if I choose Adrian just because he's safer, just because he makes sense on paper, I'll spend the rest of my life wondering what if. And that's not fair to him. He deserves someone who chooses him because they can't imagine their life without him, not someone who chose him because he was the responsible decision. And what about what you deserve? What about the quiet life you built, the peace you worked so hard to achieve? Maybe I was building the wrong thing. The words felt like both confession and revelation. Maybe I was so focused on avoiding my parents' mistakes that I built a life without any real feeling in it at all. Safe, controlled, empty. Maya reached over and squeezed Lena's hand. I hope you're right about him. I hope Marco Russo is worth blowing up your entire life for. Because that's what you're doing, you know. After today, nothing will ever be the same. I know. Lena returned the squeeze, grateful for her friend's honesty, even when it hurt. But staying the same isn't an option anymore. The moment I walked into that family dinner, I stepped into a different world. Now I just have to decide if I'm brave enough to actually live in it. Maya left at 1:30, leaving Lena alone to finish her preparations. She'd thought about changing into something more formal, more armor-like, but decided against it. If she was going to be honest, she needed to be herself. Yoga pants, simple tank top, hair pulled back in a messy bun. No masks, no performance, just the truth. Adrian arrived first at exactly 2 o'clock. He looked tired, like he'd slept as poorly as Lena had, but his smile was warm when he stepped through the new studio door. New glass looks good, he said, his attempt at lightness falling flat in the heavy air between them. Marco's people installed it this morning. Lena gestured to the bench. Will you sit? Marco should be here any minute. Should I be worried that you know his schedule? Adrian's tone was teasing, but pain flickered in his eyes. Never mind. Don't answer that. They sat in uncomfortable silence, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Lena wanted to reach for his hand, to offer comfort, but it felt dishonest when she knew what she was about to do. Marco's arrival shattered the quiet. He walked through this door with his usual controlled intensity, his eyes immediately finding Lena before cataloging every detail of the studio, assessing threats even in this supposedly safe space. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, casual but expensive, and Lena hated how her body responded to his presence with that now familiar electric awareness. Marco. Adrian stood and the brothers faced each other with the kind of tension that spoke of years of unresolved conflict. Adrian. Marco's voice was carefully neutral. He turned to Lena. You wanted us both here. We're here. Lena stood as well, her legs unsteady but her resolve firm. She'd rehearsed this moment a dozen different ways, but now that it was here, All her carefully planned words evaporated. "I need to be honest with both of you," she started, her voice stronger than she felt. "About what I'm feeling, what I want, what I've been too afraid to admit even to myself." "Lena, you don't have to so Adrian began, but Marco cut him off. "Let her speak." Marco's eyes never left Lena's face. "She asked us here for a reason. The least we can do is listen." Lena took a deep breath, centering herself the way she taught her students to do before a difficult pose. "Adrian, you're one of the best men I've ever met. You're kind and patient, and you've treated me with a respect and gentleness that I didn't know I was missing until I found it with you. You make me feel safe, valued, like I could build a good life, a peaceful life, with someone who would never hurt me." Adrian's expression was carefully controlled, but she could see him bracing for the inevitable blow. "But when I'm with you, there's this part of me that stays locked away. The part that feels deeply, that wants intensely, that craves connection that goes beyond compatible life goals and mutual respect." Lena's throat burned with unshed tears. "I've tried to convince myself that what we have is enough, that safety and kindness should be enough. But it's not, and pretending otherwise is hurting both of us." "So you're choosing Marco?" Adrian's voice was flat, resigned. "I'm choosing honesty, which means admitting that, yes, what I feel for Marco is different from what I feel for you. It's not better or worse, just different. More consuming, more terrifying, more real in a way I can't explain or defend." "You don't need to defend it." Adrian's smile was sad, understanding in a way that made Lena's guilt sharper. "I saw it the moment Marco walked into my mother's kitchen, the way you looked at each other. I knew then. I just hoped I was wrong." Marco had been silent through this exchange, his body coiled with tension, his expression unreadable. Now he stepped forward, his attention fixed entirely on Lena. "Before you say anything else, you need to understand what you're choosing." Marco's voice was rough, urgent. "This isn't some romantic notion of danger and intensity, Lena. This is my actual life. The threats won't stop with the Castellanos. There will always be someone looking for leverage, always be risk, always be compromises to your freedom and safety." "I know." "Do you?" Marco moved closer, and Adrian tensed but didn't intervene. "Do you understand that choosing me means losing parts of yourself? Your independence, your privacy, your ability to make simple decisions without calculating risk? I'm not exaggerating when I say my world will consume you if you let it." "Then I won't let it." Lena held her ground even as Marco invaded her space, even as his proximity made her heart race. "I'm not choosing to be consumed, Marco. I'm choosing to be with someone who makes me feel alive. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Because from where I'm standing, those look dangerously similar." "Stop trying to scare her away." Adrian's voice cut through the tension. "You've been doing this since the beginning, Marco. Pushing her toward me while simultaneously pulling her toward you. Make a choice. Either you want her or you don't. But stop torturing all of us with your noble sacrifice routine." Marco's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his dark eyes. "You have no idea what you're talking about. Don't I? I've watched you do this my entire life. Want something desperately while convincing yourself you can't have it. You're so busy being the martyr, the one who makes the hard choices, that you can't accept when something good is being offered to you freely." Adrian stood, moving to stand beside Lena in a show of solidarity that was both touching and heartbreaking. "She's choosing you, Marco. Despite all your warnings and all your attempts to push her away. The least you can do is be honest about whether you actually want her or if you're just addicted to the chase." The brothers stared at each other, years of sibling rivalry and unspoken resentment crackling between them. Lena watched, feeling like she was witnessing something private and painful, the kind of confrontation that had probably been building for years. "You think I don't want her?" Marco's voice was dangerously soft. "You think any of this has been about the chase?" "I think you're terrified." Adrian's accusation was gentle but devastating. "I think you've spent so long being the strong one, the one who protects everyone else, that you've forgotten how to let someone close enough to actually know you. And Lena scares you because she sees past all your control to the man underneath." "Adrian," Lena started, but Marco's harsh laugh cut her off. "You want honesty? Fine. Here's honesty. Marco turned to Lena, and the raw emotion in his face stole her breath. I saw you standing in my mother's kitchen, and something in my chest cracked open. Not attraction, not simple desire, but recognition. Like I'd been waiting my entire life for you to walk through that door. And it terrified me because I've never felt that before. Never wanted someone so completely that the thought of anything happening to them feels like contemplating my own death. The confession hung in the air, devastating in its vulnerability. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs, her entire body responding to the truth in Marco's words. I tried to push you toward Adrian because he's the better man, Marco continued, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't bothering to hide anymore. He would give you a good life, a safe life, the kind of love that doesn't come with armed guards and enemies and blood on my hands that never quite washes off. But every time I tried to walk away, every time I told myself you deserved better, I couldn't stop watching you, couldn't stop wanting you, couldn't stop thinking about what it would feel like to have you choose me anyway. So why are you still fighting this? Lena moved toward him, closing the distance he'd tried to maintain. Why are you still giving me reasons to run when what I'm trying to do is stay? Because I'm selfish enough to take what you're offering, but I'm not cruel enough to pretend it won't cost you. Marco's hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. Once you're mine, Lena, I won't be able to let you go. Not if you change your mind, not if it gets too hard, not if you wake up one day and realize you made a mistake. I don't do temporary. I don't do casual. If you choose me, you're choosing all of it. The danger, the intensity, the parts of me that are dark and damaged and not fit for someone like you. Someone like me. Lena's laugh was shaky, emotional. You keep saying that like I'm some fragile thing that needs protecting from reality. But I'm not, Marco. I'm a woman who spent her entire adult life being careful and controlled and safe. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of building a life based on fear instead of feeling. Then what do you want? Marco's thumb brushed across her cheekbone, and Lena leaned into his touch without thinking. Tell me exactly what you want, Lena. I want you. The words came out strong, certain, no hesitation. I want the intensity and the complications, and yes, even the danger because it comes with you. I want to stop pretending that safe is the same as happy. I want to feel alive instead of just protected. I want... Marco kissed her, hard, desperate, claiming, his hands framing her face as he finally gave in to what had been building between them since that first look across his mother's kitchen. Lena gasped against his mouth, her entire body igniting, every nerve ending suddenly, acutely alive. This wasn't Adrian's gentle kisses, wasn't carefully controlled affection. This was possession and promise, and a passion that threatened to consume them both. When Marco finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. You're sure? He asked, his voice rough. Because once I claim you in front of my brother, in front of my family, there's no taking it back. You become mine, and I become yours, and everyone will know it. I'm sure. Lena's hands fisted in his sweater, holding him close. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Marco's eyes closed, something like relief and fear warring on his face. Then he turned to Adrian, and Lena's heart broke at the pain in his brother's expression. Adrian had watched the entire exchange, and now he stood with his hands in his pockets, his face a careful mask that couldn't quite hide the devastation underneath. I hope you know what you're doing, he said quietly. Both of you. Adrian, I'm so sorry, Lena started, but Adrian held up a hand. Don't apologize for being honest. You were kinder than you had to be, ending this before we got in any deeper. Adrian's smile was crooked, pained. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt like hell, but I appreciate the honesty. I never wanted to hurt you. Lena pulled away from Marco, needing Adrian to understand. You were everything I thought I wanted, everything I thought I should want. And if I'd never met Marco, but you did meet him, and some things, once you feel them, you can't unfeel. Adrian looked at his brother, and something complicated passed between them. Take care of her, Marco. Actually take care of her, not just protect her. She deserves more than just being kept safe. I know. Marco's voice was quiet, serious. I'm sorry, Adrian, for all of this. Are you? Because it looks like you got exactly what you wanted. There was no bitterness in Adrian's words, just tired acceptance. Just promise me you'll remember she's a person, not a possession. That she had a whole life before you that deserves respect. I promise. Marco extended his hand, and after a long moment, Adrian took it. The handshake between them felt like both goodbye and understanding, like the closing of one chapter and the acknowledgement that nothing would ever be the same. Adrian left without looking back, and Lena felt tears slip down her cheeks as she watched him go. He's gonna hate me. No. Adrian's incapable of hate. He'll be hurt, probably for a while, but he'll move on. He'll find someone who chooses him first, who doesn't have to convince themselves he's enough. Marco pulled Lena back into his arms, and she went willingly, needing the comfort of his solid presence. And eventually, he'll probably even forgive us. What about your family? Your mother loved how I was with Adrian. This is going to devastate her. My mother wants her sons to be happy. When she sees that you make me happy, really happy, not just temporarily satisfied, she'll come around. Marco pressed a kiss to the top of her head. Though I won't lie, there will be an adjustment period. Sunday dinners might be uncomfortable for a while. Lena laughed despite her tears, the sound shaky but genuine. This is insane. All of this is completely insane. Yes, but it's honest. Marco tilted her chin up, making her meet his eyes. No more pretending, Lena. No more trying to be what you think you should be. You're mine now, and I take care of what's mine. Which means you get to be exactly who you are. Complicated, intense, brave enough to choose what you actually want instead of what's safe. And what am I choosing? Really choosing? Beyond just you? A life that's never boring, protection that's absolute but sometimes suffocating, a man who'll worship you and frustrate you in equal measure. Danger, yes, but also security in knowing that I'll burn down the world before I let anyone hurt you. Marco's smile was dark, promising. And intensity, Lena. So much intensity that safe will feel like a distant memory. When you put it that way, how could I refuse? Lena's attempt at lightness was undermined by the way her voice shook. You can still refuse. Right now, this moment, you can change your mind. Walk away, go after Adrian, choose the life that makes sense. Marco's hands tightened on her waist. But if you stay, if you choose this, I need you to understand something crucial. What? The Castellano situation is about to get worse before it gets better. They threatened you to test my response. Now that you're officially mine, they'll see you as legitimate leverage, which means I have to send a very clear message about what happens to people who threaten what belongs to me. Lena's stomach clenched with dread, and something uncomfortably close to anticipation. What kind of message? The kind that leaves no room for interpretation. The kind that makes every other family in New York understand that you're untouchable. Marco's voice was cold, calculating, the voice of the man who ran an empire built on fear and respect. It won't be pretty, Lena, and you'll have to live with knowing that blood was spilled because you chose me. Will you tell me about it? After? Do you want me to? Lena thought about that, about whether she wanted to know the details of violence done in her name. Yes, I think I do. If I'm choosing this life, if I'm choosing you, then I want to know all of it, the good and the bad and the ugly parts you'd rather keep hidden. Something like respect flickered in Marco's eyes. Most people don't want to know. They're happy to accept the protection without acknowledging the cost. I'm not most people. Lena met his gaze steadily. And if we're doing this, really doing this, then I don't want lies between us, even comfortable ones. No lies. I promise. Marco pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her with a possessiveness that should have felt restrictive but instead felt like safety. Though fair warning, some truths are going to be hard to hear. I know, but I'd rather face hard truths with you than comfortable lies with anyone else. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the center of Lena's studio, the afternoon sun streaming through the new window that represented both destruction and renewal. Outside, Brooklyn continued its ordinary rhythm, people going about their normal lives completely unaware that Lena Hart's world had just transformed irrevocably. I should call Maya, Lena said finally. Tell her what happened. She's going to think I've lost my mind. You probably have. Marco's voice held a hint of amusement. But I'm not complaining, and I need to cancel my evening classes. Figure out what to tell my students about the window, about why I'm going to need to adjust my schedule. Practical concerns flooded back, grounding Lena in the reality of her choice. How much of this do I tell people? As little as possible for now. Let me handle the Castellano situation first. Then we can figure out how to integrate you into my world without making you a bigger target than necessary. Marco released her reluctantly. Speaking of which, I need to make some calls, set things in motion. The message you mentioned. Yes, Marco's expression hardened. It needs to happen tonight. While they're still expecting negotiation rather than action, the element of surprise is crucial. Lena's stomach twisted with anxiety and guilt, and the terrible knowledge that she was complicit in whatever was about to happen. Will anyone die? Honestly, I don't know yet. Depends on how they respond to my opening move. Marco cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. Does that scare you, knowing that your choice might cost lives? Yes, but I'm choosing you anyway. Lena covered his hands with hers. Does that make me a terrible person? It makes you human. And brave. And mine. Marco kissed her again, softer this time, a promise rather than a claim. I'll be back tonight. Late, probably. Will you wait up? Should I? Only if you want to know what happened. If you'd rather maintain some distance from that part of my life, I'll understand. Lena thought about that, about whether she was strong enough to hear details of violence done in her name. Come back, she said finally. Whatever happens, whatever you have to do, come back and tell me. I meant what I said about no lies between us. Even when the truth is ugly? Especially then. Lena kissed him once more, tasting the promise of a future that was anything but simple. I chose you, Marco. All of you. The parts that protect me and the parts that scare me. So yes, come back and tell me everything. Marco left with visible reluctance, his body language screaming that he wanted to stay, to hold her, to keep her close now that he'd finally claimed her. But duty called, and Lena was learning that being with Marco Russo meant accepting that his responsibilities extended far beyond their relationship. Alone in her studio, Lena sank onto her mat and tried to process what she'd just done. She'd chosen the dangerous brother, the complicated one, the man whose life came with armed guards and enemies and violence done in the shadows. She'd chosen intensity over safety, passion over peace, honest feeling over comfortable pretense. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maya. Well, what happened? Do I need to bring ice cream or champagne? Lena stared at the message, trying to figure out how to explain what had just transpired. Finally, she typed, neither. Bring wine. A lot of wine. And prepare yourself because I just made the most reckless decision of my life, and I need you to tell me I'm not completely insane. Maya's response was immediate. On my way. And honey, if you chose Marco, insane doesn't even begin to cover it, but I love you anyway. While waiting for Maya, Lena called her evening students to cancel classes, citing personal matters that required her immediate attention. She'd deal with the business implications later, the lost revenue, the questions, the eventual explanation she'd have to give about why her perfectly ordered life was suddenly so chaotic. Right now, all she could think about was Marco somewhere in the city, setting in motion whatever violence was necessary to keep her safe. Her choice, her consequences, her responsibility to bear. The weight of it settled in her chest like lead, heavy and inescapable. This was what loving Marco Russo meant, accepting that his protection came with a price paid in other people's blood, that her safety was purchased through fear and force and methods she'd never have to use but would always know existed. Maya arrived 20 minutes later with 3 bottles of wine and the kind of no-nonsense expression that said she was prepared for anything. Okay, start from the beginning and don't leave anything out. I want to know exactly how you went from sweet yoga instructor to mob boss girlfriend in less than a week. Technically, it's been 4 days. Lena poured them both generous glasses of wine. And I'm not sure girlfriend is the right term for what I am now. What are you then? His. The word felt strange on Lena's tongue, possessive and claimed in equal measure. Marco said once I'm his. Not casual, not temporary, not anything halfway. Just completely, irrevocably his. Maya whistled low. That's intense, even for you. And you're okay with that? With being someone's possession? That's not what he meant. Lena struggled to articulate the difference. It's not about owning me like property. It's about commitment so complete that there's no ambiguity, no wondering where you stand. He's mine just as much as I'm his. We belong to each other. That sounds romantic, right up until the moment you want independence and he's sending armed guards to follow you to the grocery store. Maya's voice was gentle, but concerned. I'm not trying to rain on your parade, Lena. I just want to make sure you're going into this with your eyes open. My eyes are open. Maybe for the first time in years. Lena took a long sip of wine, letting the warmth spread through her chest. I know this is reckless. I know everyone's going to think I've lost my mind, but Maya, when I'm with him, I feel alive in a way I've never felt before. Like I've been holding my breath my entire adult life, and I'm finally exhaling. And Adrian? How did he take it? Better than I deserved. Guilt twisted in Lena's stomach. He was hurt, but he understood. He even told Marco to take care of me, to remember I'm a person, not just something to protect. Good, because that's going to be the real challenge here, maintaining your sense of self while being with someone as overwhelming as Marco Russo. Maya refilled their glasses. Promise me you won't lose yourself in this, Lena. Promise me that 6 months from now, you'll still be the woman who built a business from nothing, who has her own thoughts and opinions and boundaries. I promise. Lena meant it, even as she wondered if it was a promise she could keep. Marco said he wants me exactly as I am, complicated, intense, brave enough to choose what I want. Then hold him to that. The first time he tries to make decisions for you without consultation, the first time he puts his protection ahead of your autonomy, you call him on it. Maya's expression was serious. Loving someone dangerous doesn't mean surrendering your power. It means being strong enough to stand beside them as an equal. They talked long into the evening, Maya asking questions, and Lena answering with an honesty that was both liberating and terrifying. By the time Maya left, Lena felt marginally more grounded, more certain that her choice, while reckless, wasn't entirely insane. But as midnight approached, and Marco still hadn't returned, anxiety began to creep in. What was he doing? What message was he sending? How much blood would be spilled because she'd chosen to love him? At 1 a.m, Lena's phone finally buzzed. It's done. I'm on my way to you. Are you still awake? Yes. Waiting. Good. We need to talk. The words should have scared her. Instead, they brought relief. Whatever had happened, Marco was keeping his promise. No lies, no comfortable distance, just the truth in all its ugly complexity. When he walked through her door 20 minutes later, Lena saw it immediately. The tension in his shoulders, the darkness in his eyes, the careful control of someone who'd just done something terrible and necessary. He wasn't physically harmed, but something in him looked wounded anyway. Tell me, Lena said, pulling him inside and locking the door behind them. Marco sank onto her couch, his head falling back against the cushions, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. The Castellanos sent 4 men to deliver the brick through your window. We found 3 of them. Made it very clear that threatening you was a mistake they wouldn't survive repeating. Made it clear how? Do you really want those details? Yes. Lena sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. His knuckles were bruised, she noticed. Evidence of violence delivered personally. I told you, no lies between us, even when the truth is hard. Marco was quiet for a long moment, and when he finally spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. We broke bones, delivered pain proportionate to the threat they represented. Then we sent them back to their boss with a message. Lena Hart is under the permanent protection of the Russo family. Any further action against her will be considered a declaration of war. And war with us is something they can't afford. Did you kill anyone? No, not tonight. But I made it clear that mercy was a one-time offer. Marco's thumb traced circles on her palm. They'll test the boundaries once more, probably. It's what organizations like theirs do. Push to see if threats are real or just posturing. But when they do, the response will be lethal. And they know it. Lena absorbed this information, trying to reconcile the man holding her hand with the man who'd orchestrated calculated violence on her behalf. "How do you do it?" she asked quietly. "How do you hurt people and then come home and be gentle?" "Years of practice and compartmentalization that probably isn't healthy." Marco turned to face her, his expression raw. "This is what I meant when I said my world would cost you. You're going to spend the rest of your life knowing that people suffer because they threaten what's mine, that blood gets spilled to keep you safe. Can you live with that?" "I don't know," Lena admitted, "but I'm choosing to try, because the alternative, walking away from you, going back to my safe, controlled existence, feels like dying slowly instead of living dangerously." Marco pulled her close, and Lena went willingly, curling into his side with a sense of rightness that defied all logic. This was where she belonged, in the arms of a dangerous man who'd just proven exactly how far he'd go to protect her. "I'm sorry," Marco said quietly, "for dragging you into this, for making your life complicated and dangerous, for being selfish enough to keep you anyway. Don't be. I walked into this with my eyes open." Lena pressed her face against his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Well, maybe not entirely open at first, but open enough now, and I'm choosing to stay." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the quiet of Lena's apartment, the city humming outside her windows. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new consequences to face. But tonight, they had this, honest truth and dangerous love, and the beginning of something neither of them could control. And for the first time in her carefully controlled life, Lena wasn't afraid of the chaos. She was choosing it. Marco stayed that night and the night after, until staying became their new normal. Lena woke each morning to find him already awake, watching her with an intensity that should have been unsettling but instead felt like being seen for the first time in her life. He brought coffee to her bed, kissed her temple with a tenderness that contradicted everything she knew about him, and left for meetings she understood were dangerous without her having to ask. The Castellanos tested the boundaries exactly once more, 3 days after Marco's message. A car followed Lena home from her studio, staying just close enough to be noticed, just threatening enough to be intentional. She called Marco immediately, her hands shaking despite her attempt at calm. He arrived within minutes with 4 of his men, and the following car disappeared so quickly, Lena wondered if she'd imagined it. But Marco's expression, cold, deadly, absolutely merciless, told her everything she needed to know. That night he came home late with blood on his shirt cuff that he thought he'd hidden. "It's over," he said simply, pulling her into his arms. "The Castellanos won't bother you again. Ever." Lena didn't ask for details. She'd learned that some truths were better accepted than examined, and the price of her safety was one she'd chosen to let Marco pay without watching every transaction. But she held him tighter that night, this man who'd done terrible things to keep her safe, and tried not to think about the fact that she was grateful for the violence. The real challenge came 2 weeks later, when Sofia Russo called and invited them both to Sunday dinner. Not just Lena, not just Marco, but specifically both of them together. The invitation felt like both acceptance and trial, and Lena's stomach twisted with anxiety as Marco drove them to Bay Ridge. "She knows?" Lena asked, smoothing down the same navy dress she'd worn to that first dinner that felt like a lifetime ago. "She knows." Marco's hand found hers on the console between them. "Mama's not happy about the situation, but she's practical. She knows I'm serious about you, and she knows fighting it would just push me away, so she's choosing acceptance." "And Adrian?" Marco's jaw tightened slightly. "He'll be there. With someone new, actually. Maria Castellano." "Wait, Castellano? As in the family that threatened me? As in the daughter of their boss?" "Adrian's dating her as part of the peace negotiations." Marco's voice was carefully neutral. "It's strategic on both sides, a show of good faith, proof that our families can coexist peacefully. And before you ask, yes, Adrian agreed to it voluntarily. He's not being forced." "That's insane." Lena processed this information, trying to reconcile gentle Adrian with the calculated politics of crime families. "He's dating someone to prevent a war?" "Welcome to my world." Marco squeezed her hand. "Nothing is simple. Everything is strategic. Even love becomes currency in the right circumstances. The Russo house was just as warm and welcoming as Lena remembered, but the atmosphere was distinctly different. The family gathered in the living room was quieter, more watchful, their greetings polite but measured. Sophia hugged Lena with genuine affection, but her eyes were sharp, assessing, making sure Marco's choice was worthy of the disruption she'd caused. And then there was Adrian, standing in the kitchen with a beautiful, dark-haired woman whose smile was warm despite the complicated circumstances. Maria Castellano was elegant, poised, and looked at Adrian with genuine interest that might or might not be entirely strategic. Lena. Adrian's greeting was cordial, professional, the warmth from before replaced by careful distance. You look well. So do you. Lena meant it. Adrian looked lighter somehow, less burdened, like choosing to move forward had lifted a weight from his shoulders. Adrian, Don't. He held up a hand, his smile kind but firm. We're past apologies. What's done is done. I just hope you're happy. I am. Lena glanced at Marco, who stood close enough to touch, but was giving them space for this conversation. Probably happier than I deserve to be, given the mess I caused. You didn't cause anything. You just had the courage to be honest about what you wanted. Adrian's attention shifted to Maria, and something soft flickered in his expression. Turns out sometimes the universe has different plans than we expect. Maria stepped forward, extending her hand with a grace that spoke of careful breeding and diplomatic training. It's nice to meet you, Lena. Adrian's told me about you. All good things, I promise. I find that hard to believe, considering I broke his heart. Lena shook her hand, noting the strength in Maria's grip. Hearts heal, and sometimes breaking is the first step to finding the right fit. Maria's smile was knowing, understanding in a way that suggested she was more than just a strategic pawn in family politics. Besides, I should thank you. If you'd chosen Adrian, I'd never have met him, and that would have been a shame. The easy acceptance, the lack of drama or judgment, made Lena's eyes burn with unexpected tears. She'd been bracing for hostility, for whispered condemnation, for the kind of social punishment women inflict on other women who break the rules. Instead, she found understanding and the beginning of what might actually become friendship. Dinner was less awkward than Lena feared, though tension hummed beneath the surface pleasantries. Sophia seated Lena and Marco together, a public acknowledgement of their relationship, while Adrian and Maria sat directly across from them. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. Two brothers, two women, two families finding a way to coexist peacefully. So, Lena, Sophia said during the pasta course, her tone deceptively casual. Marco tells me you're keeping your studio, that you're not giving up your work. It was a test. Lena could feel everyone at the table watching, waiting to see how she'd navigate this. Yes, my studio is important to me. It's not just a business, it's my passion, my purpose. The thing I built from nothing. I won't give that up for any relationship. Even when that relationship comes with complications, dangers. Sophia's eyes were sharp, maternal concern mixed with assessment of whether Lena was strong enough for her son. Especially then. Lena met Sophia's gaze directly. I understand that being with Marco means accepting certain realities, but I won't lose myself in the process. He doesn't want me to, and I won't let it happen. Something like respect flickered in Sophia's expression. She turned to Marco, who'd been quietly eating while this exchange happened. You picked a strong one this time. Good. You need someone who'll push back when you're being unreasonable. I'm aware, Mama. Marco's hand found Lena's under the table, squeezing gently. That's why I chose her. The rest of dinner passed with gradually easing tension, stories and laughter filling the spaces where discomfort had been. Lena watched Adrian and Maria together, noting the easy chemistry between them, the way Adrian smiled more freely than he had with her. Maybe Marco was right. Maybe the universe did have different plans, and sometimes what felt like an ending was really just a necessary course correction. After dinner, while Sophia was packaging leftover food with the determination of an Italian mother who believed love was measured in Tupperware, Adrian caught Lena alone on the back porch. I meant what I said earlier, he began, leaning against the railing. I'm glad you're happy. Genuinely glad, not just being polite. I believe you, and I'm glad you found Maria. She seems wonderful. She is. Smart, funny, understands the family business in ways you never would have had to. It's easier with her. Adrian paused, choosing his words carefully. With you, I was always trying to protect you from the reality of what we are. With Maria, I can just be myself. It's different, but good different. I'm sorry I couldn't be that for you. Lena's voice was soft with genuine regret. You deserve someone who didn't need protecting from your reality. And you deserved someone who made you feel alive instead of safe. We both got what we needed, just not from each other. Adrian smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. For what it's worth, I forgive you. Both of you. Life's too short to hold on to anger over something that was probably inevitable from the moment Marco walked into that kitchen. Thank you. Lena hugged him impulsively, relieved when he returned the embrace without hesitation. For understanding, for being kind even when you had every right not to be. That's what good men do. Adrian released her, his expression turning serious. But Lena, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you'll tell Marco when he's being too controlling, too protective, too much. He has a tendency to consume the people he loves. Don't let him consume you. I won't, I promise. Good. Adrian glanced through the window where Marco was helping his mother in the kitchen, and something complicated crossed his face. He loves you, you know, really loves you in a way I've never seen him love anyone. It scares him, which is why he'll try to control everything around you. But if you can handle that, if you can be strong enough to push back when necessary, you two might actually work. Marco appeared in the doorway before Lena could respond, his eyes immediately finding her with that possessive intensity that still made her breath catch. Everything okay out here? Everything's fine, Adrian clapped his brother on the shoulder. Just giving Lena some advice on handling you. She doesn't need advice. She handles me just fine. Marco's arm slipped around Lena's waist, pulling her close with a casual possessiveness that should have annoyed her but instead felt like coming home. You ready to go? I know you have an early class tomorrow. They said their goodbyes, Sophia pressing containers of food into Lena's hands along with a fierce hug and whispered words about taking care of her son. The drive back to Brooklyn was quiet, comfortable, Marco's hand resting on Lena's thigh while she processed everything that had happened. That went better than I expected, Lena said finally. My family's practical. They care more about me being happy than about the drama it took to get there. Marco's thumb traced circles on her leg, a gesture that was becoming familiar. Though Mama will probably call you this week to have a private conversation about expectations and boundaries. I can handle your mother. I know you can. It's one of the things I love about you. The words were casual, but Lena felt their weight. Marco had said he loved her before, but usually in the heat of passion or intensity. This was different, calm, certain, stated as simple fact. I love you too, Lena said, testing the words, finding them true. Even when you're being overprotective and controlling and refusing to let me go to the grocery store alone. That was one time, and there was an active threat. It was 3 times, and the threat was theoretical. Lena's voice held amusement rather than anger. But I'm learning to pick my battles. Some things are worth fighting you on. Others I can let go. Such as? Such as the security cameras you installed without asking. Such as the background checks you ran on all my students. Such as the new alarm system that's probably more sophisticated than what's protecting the White House. Marco had the grace to look slightly sheepish. I was going to tell you about all of that. When? After I discovered them myself? Lena turned to face him, her expression serious. Marco, we need to establish some ground rules. I understand that protecting me is important to you. I even appreciate it, most of the time. But I can't live in a gilded cage no matter how much you love me. I need autonomy. I need to make my own choices, even when those choices carry risk. I know. Marco's jaw tightened, conflict evident in his expression. But understanding that intellectually and actually accepting it when you're in potential danger are 2 different things. Then we'll work on it. Together. You'll learn to trust that I can handle myself, and I'll learn to accept reasonable precautions without feeling suffocated. Lena took his hand, intertwining their fingers. This is a partnership, Marco, not a protection detail. Partnership. Marco tested the word like he was learning a foreign language. I'm not sure I know how to do that. I'm used to being in control, making decisions unilaterally, not consulting anyone. Then learn. Because I'm not going anywhere, and I refuse to spend the rest of my life fighting you for basic autonomy. Lena's voice was firm but loving. I chose you, Marco. The real you, complications and control issues and all. But I chose you as an equal partner, not as someone to be managed or protected like a child. They pulled up to Lena's building, the new security evident in the additional lighting and cameras Marco had installed. He killed the engine but didn't immediately move to get out, his expression thoughtful. My father used to say that loving someone was the most dangerous weakness a man in our business could have, Marco said quietly. That caring too much made you vulnerable, gave your enemies leverage, turned strength into liability. I believed that for years, kept everyone at a distance, never let anyone close enough to matter. What changed? You walked into my mother's kitchen looking terrified and beautiful and completely out of place in my world. And I realized my father was wrong. Love isn't weakness. It's what you're willing to fight for that makes you strong. Marco turned to face her, and the vulnerability in his eyes took her breath away. But you're right. I can't protect you by controlling you. I'll try to do better. Try to remember that partnership means trust, even when trust feels dangerous. That's all I'm asking. Not perfection, just effort. Lena leaned across the console and kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise. Now come upstairs and help me figure out how to disable at least half of these security measures you installed without asking. Not happening, but I'll explain what they all do and why they're necessary. Compromise. I'll take it. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm that was both familiar and entirely new. Lena taught her classes, Marco ran his empire, and they navigated the complicated dance of building a life together while maintaining their individual identities. It wasn't always easy. Marco's protective instincts clashed regularly with Lena's need for independence, leading to arguments that were passionate and occasionally frustrating, but always honest. But they learned. Marco learned to ask before making decisions that affected Lena's life, and Lena learned to accept that some security measures were non-negotiable when loving a man with dangerous enemies. They found middle ground in the spaces between control and freedom, safety and autonomy, passion and peace. The real test came 3 months into their relationship, when one of Lena's students, a sweet college girl named Jennifer, asked if she could bring her boyfriend to watch a class. Lena agreed without thinking, only to have Marco's head of security call 10 minutes later to inform her that Jennifer's boyfriend had connections to a rival organization. The old Lena would have called Marco immediately, deferred to his judgment, let him handle the situation. The new Lena, the one who was learning to stand her ground, made a different choice. She called Marco, yes, but not to ask permission. I'm allowing Jennifer to bring her boyfriend to class, Lena said when he answered. I'm telling you as a courtesy, not asking for approval. But I thought you should know, and I thought you should know that I've thought this through and I'm comfortable with my decision. The silence on the other end was loaded. Lena could practically hear Marco wrestling with his protective instincts, his need to control the situation warring with his promise to respect her autonomy. Why are you comfortable with it? He asked finally, his voice carefully controlled. Because Jennifer is a good kid whose boyfriend happens to have family and a business similar to yours. That doesn't make him a threat. And more importantly, my studio is my space. I won't turn it into an extension of your world where everyone gets vetted and background checked and judged by their family connections. Lena kept her voice firm, but not combative. This is one of those battles I'm choosing to fight you on. Another long pause, then quietly, okay. Okay. Lena hadn't expected capitulation quite that easily. Okay, it's your space, your decision, but I'm having 2 of my people in the coffee shop across the street during that class, non-negotiable. That's fair. Thank you for trusting me. Thank you for keeping me informed instead of just doing it and telling me after. Marco's voice softened. This partnership thing is harder than I thought it would be. For both of us. But we're learning. They were learning. Slowly, sometimes painfully, but learning nonetheless. And 3 months became 6, 6 became 9, and suddenly they were approaching the 1-year anniversary of that fateful Sunday dinner that had changed everything. Marco surprised her by suggesting they spend the anniversary not at some expensive restaurant, but back at his mother's house for Sunday dinner. The full family gathering, complete with Adrian and Maria, who were now officially engaged, cousins and uncles, and all the chaos that came with the Russo clan. "Are you sure?" Lena asked, touched by the gesture. "I know family dinners are important to you. Do you really want to share this one?" "I want to claim you in front of my family. Publicly, officially, with no ambiguity about what you mean to me." Marco's voice was serious, intense. "And I want to do it where this all started, where I first saw you and knew my life was about to change." So they went. Lena wore the same navy dress again, a private joke between them, and Marco wore the charcoal suit that made him look dangerous and devastating in equal measure. The family welcomed them with the warmth that had become familiar over the past year. The initial awkwardness long since dissolved into genuine affection. But this time, when dinner ended and the family gathered in the living room for coffee and dessert, Marco stood and called for everyone's attention. "I have an announcement to make," he said, his hand finding Lena's and pulling her to her feet beside him. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward them with varying degrees of curiosity and knowing smiles. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. They hadn't discussed this, hadn't planned whatever Marco was about to do. She shot him a questioning look, but his attention was on his family, his expression both vulnerable and determined. "Most of you know that Lena came into my life a year ago today, that she walked into this house as Adrian's date and somehow ended up choosing me instead." Marco's thumb traced circles on her palm, a gesture of comfort, or perhaps courage. "What you might not know is that from the moment I saw her, I knew. I knew she was going to change everything. I knew I'd never be the same. I knew that whatever careful distance I'd maintained from real feeling was about to be demolished." Sophia's eyes were already tearing up. Adrian watched with a smile that was genuinely happy, Maria's hand clasped in his. The rest of the family waited, rapt attention on what was clearly building to something significant. "Lena made me believe that loving someone doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. She's pushed back against my control, called me out when I'm being unreasonable, refused to let me turn her into someone who needs protecting instead of someone worth partnering with." Marco turned to face her fully, and the love in his eyes was so open, so unguarded, that Lena felt tears slip down her cheeks. She chose me when I gave her every reason not to. She stayed when things got dangerous. She built a life with me that respects both who she is and who I am. "Marco," Lena whispered, beginning to understand where this was going. "Let me finish." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his face from dangerous to devastating. "I spent my whole life believing I didn't deserve good things, that my life, my choices, my world disqualified me from the kind of love other people got to have. But Lena proved me wrong. She loved me anyway. Loves me still, despite everything, because of everything." Marco released her hand and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box that made Sophia gasp and several cousins whisper excitedly. He dropped to one knee right there in his mother's living room in front of his entire family, and Lena's breath stopped completely. "Lena Hart, you flirted with the wrong brother. You chose the complicated one, the dangerous one, the one who comes with armed guards and enemies, and a life that will never be simple." Marco opened the box, revealing a ring that was both elegant and substantial. A single diamond surrounded by smaller stones, beautiful without being ostentatious. "But I'm asking you to choose me again, permanently, publicly, with witnesses and vows and a commitment that tells the entire world you're mine and I'm yours." Lena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe, could only stare at this dangerous man on his knee in front of his family, offering her everything with a vulnerability that had to be costing him. "Marry me, Lena. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that choosing the wrong brother was actually choosing exactly right." The room held its breath. Lena was aware of Sophia clutching someone's arm, of Adrian's encouraging smile, of a dozen pairs of eyes watching this moment unfold. But all she could really see was Marco, this man who'd turned her carefully controlled life into beautiful chaos, looking at her like she was the answer to every question he'd never known to ask. "Yes, The word came out as a whisper, then stronger. Yes, of course, yes. Marco slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit, because of course he'd somehow figured out her size without asking, and stood, pulling her into a kiss that was both claiming and promise. The room erupted in cheers and applause, Sophia crying openly now, but Lana barely heard it over the pounding of her own heart. When they finally broke apart, Marco rested his forehead against hers. I love you, completely, irrevocably, for the rest of my life. I love you too, even when you're being impossible. Lena's smile was watery, emotional, especially when you're being impossible. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and champagne, family members offering advice and stories, and the kind of warm chaos that Lena had come to associate with the Russo clan. Adrian hugged her genuinely, whispering that he was happy for them both, that Marco had never looked at anyone the way he looked at her. Maria welcomed her as a future sister-in-law with the kind of knowing smile that suggested she understood exactly what Lena was getting into. But the moment that stuck with Lena was later, when Sophia pulled her aside into the quiet of the kitchen while the men were arguing about sports in the living room. My son is not an easy man to love, Sophia said, her hands cupping Lena's face the way she had that first night. He's hard, controlling, used to getting his way in everything, but he loves you, truly loves you in a way I never thought I'd see from him. I know, and I love him too, despite how complicated everything is. Good, because being a Russo woman isn't simple. We stand beside men who make difficult choices. We accept protection that sometimes feels like a cage. We live with knowing that the people we love do things in the shadows that we'd rather not examine too closely. Sophia's eyes were serious, making sure Lena understood what she was really signing up for. But we also get loved with an intensity that most people never experience. We get partners who'd burn down the world before letting harm come to us. We get the kind of devotion that doesn't waver or fade or get distracted by something shinier. I'm ready for that. All of it. I believe you are. Sophia pulled Lena into a fierce hug. Welcome to the family officially, and know that I'm here whenever you need to talk, whenever Marco's being too much, whenever you need reminding that you're not alone in this. They returned to find Marco watching for her, his eyes tracking her movement across the room with that possessive intensity that still made her stomach flip. He pulled her close the moment she was within reach, his arm around her waist, his chin resting on top of her head. Happy? He murmured against her hair. Terrified and happy and completely overwhelmed. So, basically, perfect. Lena leaned into him, letting herself be held, protected, cherished. Though we probably should have discussed the whole proposal thing before you did it in front of your entire family. Where's the romance in that? Marco's voice held amusement. Besides, I knew you'd say yes. Confident, aren't you? About this? About us? Always. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You chose me, Lena. Everything after that is just details. They left the party late, driving back to Brooklyn through streets that felt both familiar and entirely new. Lena kept looking at the ring on her finger, the physical proof that this was real, that she was actually going to marry Marco Russo and all the complications that came with him. Having second thoughts? Marco asked, noticing her distraction. No, just processing. A year ago, I was a yoga instructor with a carefully controlled life who went on a date with a nice man. Now I'm engaged to his brother who runs organized crime and has enemies who occasionally throw bricks through my window. It's a lot to take in. If you want a long engagement, time to adjust. I don't. Lena cut him off, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I don't want to wait. Don't want time to overthink this. I want to marry you, Marco, soon, before either of us can get scared of what we're doing. I'm not scared. Marco's hand found hers, his thumb brushing over the ring he'd placed there. But I like your thinking. How soon is soon? 6 months? Long enough to plan something nice, but not so long that we lose momentum. Done. I'll tell Mama tomorrow. She'll want to be involved in the planning. I'd be disappointed if she didn't. Lena smiled, imagining Sophia's enthusiastic takeover of wedding preparations. Though I'm keeping final say on the dress and the venue. Whatever you want. You could get married in yoga pants in your studio, and I'd be happy as long as you're saying yes to forever. They pulled up to Lena's building, their building now, really, since Marco spent more nights there than at his own place. He'd been talking about them finding something together, something with more security and space. But Lena had pushed back. Her studio, her apartment, her space represented the life she'd built before him, and she wasn't ready to give that up entirely, even for love. Another negotiation, another compromise to work out. But they had time now. A lifetime to figure out how to blend their worlds without either of them losing themselves in the process. 6 months later, on a perfect spring afternoon, Lena walked down the aisle of a small church in Brooklyn toward Marco Russo and the future they'd chosen together. She wore a simple white dress that allowed for movement, her hair down in the waves Marco loved, her bouquet full of flowers that meant new beginnings and brave choices. Adrian stood as Marco's best man, his smile genuine and his congratulations heartfelt. Maria sat in the front row with Sophia, both of them crying happy tears. The church was full of Russo family and Lena's friends, Maya in the front row with a tissue box and a knowing smile that said, "I told you this would be crazy, but I'm happy for you anyway." But when Lena reached the altar and took Marco's hands, when she looked into his eyes and saw love and promise and a future full of complicated intensity, none of the audience mattered. It was just them, these two people who'd chosen each other against all logic and reason. "I, Marco Russo, take you, Lena Hart, to be my wife," Marco said when it was time for vows, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to love you with everything I have, to protect you without suffocating you, to partner with you instead of controlling you, to choose you every day for the rest of my life, even when choosing you is complicated or dangerous or difficult. I, Lena Hart, take you, Marco Russo, to be my husband," Lena responded, her voice strong and clear. "I promise to love you completely, to push back when you're being unreasonable, to stand beside you instead of behind you, to choose intensity over safety, honesty over comfort, and you over everyone else every single day for the rest of my life." When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, when Marco kissed her with a passion that was probably inappropriate for church, Lena felt something settle in her chest. Peace? Maybe. Or certainty. The knowledge that she'd made the right choice, even if it was the hard one. She'd flirted with the wrong brother. She'd chosen the complicated one, the dangerous one, the one who came with armed guards and enemies, and a life that would never be simple. But standing there in Marco's arms, his ring on her finger and his promise in her heart, Lena knew with absolute certainty that wrong had somehow become exactly right. That sometimes the brother you're not supposed to choose is the one who changes your life in all the best ways. The reception was held at one of the Russo family's restaurants, the private room filled with love and laughter and the kind of chaotic warmth that came from blending families and futures. Lena danced with Marco, with Adrian, with her father who'd flown in from California looking both concerned and proud. She ate cake and drank champagne and accepted congratulations from people who were now her family through marriage and choice. But her favorite moment came late in the evening when she and Marco snuck away to the restaurant's back garden for a moment of quiet. The party continued inside, loud and joyful, but out here it was just them and the spring night and the beginning of forever. "Happy?" Marco asked, pulling her close, her head resting against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat. "Incredibly. Terrifyingly. Completely." Lena smiled against his shirt. "Thank you for not giving up on me, for fighting for this even when I was trying to choose the safe option. Thank you for being brave enough to choose me anyway, for loving me despite everything." Marco's arms tightened around her. "I don't deserve you, Lena Russo." "Probably not." She looked up at him, this man who was now her husband, her partner, her choice. "But you're stuck with me anyway. For better or worse, in danger and safety, with armed guards and security cameras, and Sunday dinners with your entire family. Best deal I ever made." Marco kissed her again, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I love you, my wife, my partner, my forever. I love you too, my husband, my choice, the right brother after all." And in that garden, under the spring stars, with the sounds of their celebration echoing around them, Lena knew that she'd found exactly what she'd been missing her entire careful, controlled life. Not safety or peace or predictable stability, but something better. Something real. She'd found love that was complicated and intense, and sometimes dangerous. She'd found a partner who challenged her and protected her and saw all of her, the good and bad and everything in between. She'd found a future that was anything but simple, and it was perfect. Years later, when people asked how they met, Marco would smile and say she'd been dating his brother first. And Lena would laugh and add that she'd flirted with the wrong brother but married the right man. Their children would roll their eyes at the story they'd heard a dozen times, but they'd also see the way their parents looked at each other, with intensity and passion and a love that had survived every challenge thrown at it. Because that was the truth Lena had learned in that kitchen a lifetime ago. Sometimes the wrong choice leads to the right life. Sometimes danger is worth the risk. Sometimes loving the complicated option is exactly what you need to finally feel alive. She'd chosen Marco Russo over safety, over simplicity, over everything she thought she wanted, and every single day since she'd chosen him again. In the quiet moments and the chaotic ones, in danger and in peace, in the life they'd built together that was messy and intense and perfectly, wonderfully theirs. The wrong brother, the dangerous one, the absolutely right choice.